Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Board Secretary on January 19th, 2022 in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board at the administration building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Clerk of Cherry Hill Township. Please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. Where's the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Sugars, would you go ahead with roll call, please?
Mrs. Arroyo. Here. Mrs. Stratton. Here. Mrs. Fleischer. Here. Ms. Friedel. Here. Dr. Rude.
Here.
Ms. Stern.
Here.
Mrs. Tong. Here. Mr. Avadia.
Here. Thank you. All right, well, tonight we have 4 excellent board candidates that we will be interviewing, and so that's going to involve some shuffling of seats. Please join me up here where your name is. You have the luxury of seeing it and I don't, but I know you'll do the right thing. Okay, good evening again. Keep taking over the board seats. So for tonight, just to lay out a little bit, we've got 5 questions. Each of you will be given an opportunity to ask. Obviously, that means one person's going twice and the rest of you are going once, but I trust that will be okay. I have every faith that you're all going to do amazingly. We appreciate your participation in this process. It's been awesome. You have some great candidates. We appreciate you spending this time with us tonight. And so without further ado, I'm going to start with Matthew Brin. Good. So to be heard correctly, you're going to press the button, it'll turn green, and then we'll hear you, and then the live stream will hear you as well.
Oh, fantastic. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes.
It's going well? Okay.
Yes. So far, so good.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Brin. I very much appreciate the opportunity to go for this position on the board. Been a Cherry Hill resident for 9 years now. My wife grew up here. My daughter goes to Horace Mann. She's in 1st grade. We chose to live in Cherry Hill because this town is amazing. And my wife had the most spectacular school experience. And we thought, what better place to raise a family than the place that she had that amazing experience? Many of her friends are still friends with her that she knew growing up in the schools. Some of them are watching on Zoom right now. And just based on my skills and experience and background in public advocacy and working for the state and a legislative district, I felt that my skills and experience were uniquely qualified me in this particular moment to join the board and offer my expertise to help us move through some of the difficult circumstances that we've all been facing over the last couple of years.
Thank you. And so we'll continue with opening comments. Joel Mayer.
Thank you. Joel Mayer, thank you for giving me the opportunity this evening. I am with my wife. We've been residents of Cherry Hill, thankful residents of Cherry Hill for almost 20 years. We have 3 children in the district school system, 2 at High School West, 1 at Carusi, and probably a third on his way. The Carusi child probably on his way to Cherry Hill West next year. My high school experience was slightly different. I grew up in Pennsauken. My parents still live in the same house. I looked at the Cherry Hill school system as really the gold standard. Most of my best friends went to either Cherry Hill East or Cherry Hill West. And I have always been thankful that we were able to settle here so that our kids could go to Cherry Hill. And frankly, the first several years, things were going so well that I was not as involved with PTA or schools as I probably could have been, frankly. And that plus a lot of travel, just didn't give me the opportunity to be as involved as I'd like to be. The last 2-3 years, certainly with the pandemic in particular, has shown me a very different side, not just of our own children and how they learn differently, and how they've navigated the pandemic, but how all of the educators and administrators at the schools handled it and continue to handle it. It's given me an opportunity to be much more involved with them. And I am looking forward to the opportunity to bring my own experiences, possibly as a listener, to bear in helping to formulate some policies to go forward. Challenges that we face are no different really than in so many other districts, but coming from one where I looked up to Cherry Hill and still do, the opportunity to continue the legacy of excellent education is something that I'm looking forward to helping in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Mazur. Mazer, my apologies.
Hi, I'm Jessica Mazer. I am a almost lifelong resident of Cherry Hill. I attended Cherry Hill Public Schools from kindergarten through 12th grade at Joyce Kilmer, Carusi Middle School, and then I graduated from High School West in 2001. When my husband and I were looking for a place to raise our children, we were fortunate enough to find something that met our needs right here in Kingston. I currently have 3 children in the district. My youngest is at Barclay Early Childhood Center, and I have 2 children at Kingston in 1st and 4th grade. I am the Cherry Hill Special Education PTA treasurer. A few years back, their treasurer abruptly quit on them, and I got a phone call when I was on vacation asking if I would fill in that spot. I didn't have a special education student in the district, but that really opened my eyes to a lot of things that were going on, and kind of like started my advocacy for students in the district. Professionally, I am a business analyst and financial manager. I live and breathe spreadsheets and data. I feel that my passion for the district and commitment to Cherry Hill, coupled with my professional expertise, make this a really good time to join the board. I thank you for having me here tonight and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gina Winters.
Hi, good evening. Thank you guys so much for having me here tonight. I also have 3 children in the district, and I also have a child at the Barclay Early Childhood Center. Actually, all 3 of my children have gone to Barclay and experienced the excellent program there. I have a daughter who's at Russell Knight Elementary School. She's a 4th grader there. And I have a son who's at Rosa as a 7th grader. So I kind of span all 3 of those levels. I think what I would bring to the board is that I have experience both in education policy, which is what my master's degree is in from Rutgers, as well as a wealth of experience when I worked for the state legislature as nonpartisan research staff. So part of my job there was being a committee aide. So what we would do is kind of what you all do. We would hold committee meetings and public hearings and get input from the public. And my job was to synthesize that public input and craft it into workable policy solutions that the legislators could then use to solve problems. And I really think that skill could be applicable here as the board this year is tackling some really significant challenges and policy questions like the bond, like middle school redistricting. You have a lot on your plate. And I think somebody who can synthesize public input and then communicate back might be an asset to the board as you're moving forward. on those policy issues. So thank you again so much for having me here tonight, and I look forward to your questions.
Wonderful. Right to the questions. Mr. Mayor, is that right? All right, I've already messed up. Ms. Mazer? Okay. Ms. Winters? Okay. Mr. Brin? Okay, all right. Always respect doctorate. We'll all get there. All right. So, Mr. Mayor, let me start with you. How do you envision your role as a board member with the upcoming bond referendum in the fall?
As an engaged board member, one that has a steep learning curve, because frankly, I have not gone through all of the line items in the bond proposal, but understand that that's important. I also I've always been aware of a strength that I have of being not intimidated enough to say there is an issue that I'm not familiar with. So when it comes to a particular issue, of whether it be the bond proposal or something else, I've always been comfortable doing that research or finding an expert that can help me do that. And certainly I am aware of the need to find money for various projects throughout the district. The ability, however, to spend the money as efficiently as possible is one that I hope I can have some productive ability to help in spending the money. $396 million is a big number. Is it too much? Frankly, I don't know. Is it not enough? I don't know. I'm not afraid to say that because I haven't seen everything yet. But I'm more than willing to listen to all the perspectives, not just of various perspectives from other board members who have experience working through bonds and previously, but also experts and consultants who have helped put some of these numbers together. So I would see my role as one of being able to be particularly objective, coming in fresh, listening to the various perspectives and need to spend X dollars on X project, and hopefully able to help build some consensus around those various projects to a successful completion, and helping to bring that and communicate the board's position effectively to the voters in Cherry Hill, because the board can do a wonderful job putting together the bond, putting together everything with the state. If that's not communicated out to the voters in Cherry Hill, then all of that work could just end up being just frustrated work. So I see my role finally at the end in helping to communicate and fashion communications as being particularly important.
Thank you. If anyone needs me to repeat the question, absolutely. If not, Ms. Mazer.
Okay, the fact that so much of the Board of Ed's effort and recently has surrounded the bond is one of the reasons that I decided it was time to put my money where my mouth is and throw my hat in the ring. I am, like I said, I'm a financial manager. One of my biggest roles is as an operations manager, including facilities, upkeep and expenses. So that's something I know intimately. Because Cherry Hill was underfunded for so long, and we, in my opinion, rightfully prioritized staff and curriculum over the upkeep of our buildings, I see the bond as something that is absolutely necessary. And I think that we, as board members, our biggest hurdle is being able to communicate effectively to the community on why it's important, to communicate what will happen with the money, why it's needed to happen, to let people that don't have students in the district know that this will affect their property values, yes or no. Will they go up? Will they go down? The bond is an infusion of funds that will allow us to fix some of the damage to our facilities that has happened over the last decade. And I really think that my background is something that would suit me for this particular job. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Winters.
Thank you. So while I was in graduate school doing education policy, I also worked for the Education Law Center in Newark while they were working on the Abbott versus Burke cases. And the thing I did was the data work for the school facilities case. So I actually spent an entire summer analyzing school facilities plans and helping put together the information for the advocates who were going before the Supreme Court on why education facilities were essential to support instruction in those districts. So I think that's an experience that I can definitely bring, the ability to look at those school facilities plans and to articulate why school facilities are necessary for instruction to happen the way we want it to happen, the way we know it can happen here in Cherry Hill. The other asset I think I would bring to the table is on communication. Politically, you have decided that you're going to go for the bond in September, which is not at a general election date. So the key to the bond passing will be turnout, right? Because it's not an election time that most people are going to be going to the polls. So the trick is going to be to communicate to the people of Cherry Hill why this bond is important. And I think to do that effectively, the communication needs to be targeted. This was something I brought up when I went to the Rosa meeting on facilities. I think the different communities within the schools need to understand how exactly the bonds will affect them. For example, at Rosa, my son is in the jazz band, my nephew is in the choir along with half the school, and my next door neighbor's son is in the drama club. All these kids would greatly benefit from the new stage that is being planned at Rosa. So those would be targeted parents that we could reach out to and say, hey, this is how the bond affects you and your families. Hey, can you reach out to 2 or 3 other parents in your community? I think that would be much more effective than just sort of generally giving information to people about why the bond is important. Well, that's key. I think if you're really going to drive people to turn out on a September day when there's no other election going on, you need to give them a reason to be invested in the bond. So I think that kind of communication politically and the thinking about how that communication can happen, which is something I've done in the past, is something I can really bring to the table when we're talking about passing the bond in September. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brin.
Thank you so much for that question. For those who may have remembered, I ran for school board in 2019, and 3 of my biggest policy proposals were based around the school lunch program, improving facilities, specifically HVAC systems, and how they improve student performance in the classroom, and expanding mental health services for students. And this was in 2019, just a few short months before the pandemic would turn all of our lives upside down. And lo and behold, major issues that we're looking at now are mental health for students and staff especially, as well as the bond to improve our facilities so that kids can have the best possible educational attainment. Currently, I'm the constituent advocate for the 6th legislative district, and one of my bosses is the assembly education chair. So we receive phone calls every single day, especially from Cherry Hill advocates. Shout out to the fair funding people who have been knocking on our door and calling our office pretty much every day for the last 2 years, making sure that they do get the funding that they deserve. And I know my bosses worked tirelessly to make sure that Cherry Hill did receive its fair funding. I think it's $24 million this year, which makes up roughly 11% of the overall budget. In terms of the bond and how I can help communicate with that, in a previous life, I did communication for a public health advocacy organization called Trenton Health Team, where they were trying to do new and interesting public health initiatives in the city of Trenton. And we had to go into those communities and figure out how to get those people on board with those different initiatives. And I feel very similarly about how this board is dealing with not only the bond, but also public health initiatives that are impacting everybody on a day-to-day basis, and how we need to communicate to those people what our ever-changing policies are based on what the CDC is saying. So because I have experience in that area and I worked in public policy and for the state government, I feel like I have a unique set of knowledge and skills to provide to the board to allow us to communicate to the community and create buy-in for these initiatives.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Mazur. What are the district's top 3 priorities and how will you support them?
Okay. Right now, I would say that the top 3 priorities in the district are the bond, the middle school and possibly elementary school redistricting, and I guess how to word it, trying to get back to the new normal after the last 2 years of what we've been through. So as far as the bond, I think my previous answer kind of touched base on that with how I would support that, especially with my background in finance. The middle school redistricting and the possible elementary school redistricting, that's really a hot button issue right now in the district. I know that a lot of us are looking at it from a lens of what would be best for us personally, when I say us, I'm an elementary school parent and a preschool parent. So these are things that are super relative to the decisions that my family is making. And I can say, well, no, I don't want that to happen because that wouldn't work for me. So I think coming to the board with a lens of what works best for the community as a whole, what helps us have the most diverse, equitable schools that we can have, what helps with the logistics of the busing and the moving kids around, because we have some elementary schools that are all over the map, and that's got to be costing us money to move all of these students around the township. So I think that those are probably the most important agenda type topics. But the third thing, the finding our new normal. I feel like we've had a lot of community infighting on like what we should do, what we shouldn't do. None of us have lived through a pandemic before. None of us, there's not a rule book. There's nothing to guide us. And I think everyone's doing the best that they can right now. And I think that we need to look at the experts, the education experts, the medical experts, the mental health experts on how we can bring our community back together without these ever-changing processes, and what works best going forward, what lessons were learned. I mean, now we're one-on-one for technology. We weren't like that before. Like, this kind of forced our hands on that, and that's a really awesome thing that happened. So it's not all bad. So we need to take the good and foster that, and just get everyone into the best position they can at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Winters.
I mean, I think the number one issue facing the board this year is the bond. I mean, I think at this point, we have a once in a generation opportunity to envision what we want our schools to be. We're looking 20 years forward. So it's not just about, your kids and my kids, but it's about what Cherry Hill will be when all these things are built out and kids are coming into school 20 years from now. So it's sort of a visioning process. And the buildings that we build will define in a lot of ways what our values are. And I think you put a lot of that thought, and you listened a lot to the community to put that thought into what the bond will be. So I think the bonds definitely in the physical buildings are huge, because I mean, as much as we saw how amazing the teachers were during the pandemic, and my kids had awesome teachers, asking them to do so much with so little was so hard to see. Imagine what they could do if we gave them everything that they needed to really teach our kids. Imagine how much better art class would be with a dedicated art room, with art supplies and art materials for our kids to create. I mean, that was the reality for my oldest when he entered elementary school. That's not the reality anymore for my daughter and for my little guy who's going to be coming up next year. So I think our values and our priorities are going into the bonds in a way that we can really say, like, this is what Cherry Hill is about. So I think that's sort of the underpinning of the bond process. The second thing that, and Jessica touched on it, was the middle school redistricting. I mean, I have a fourth grader, so she will be in that first class to go into middle school under whatever process you decide. And I think with the middle school redistricting, what's confusing to me is that I'm not really sure what the goal of the process is. And I think the goal should really drive what your solution is. But I think I'm somebody who, tries to pay pretty close attention to what's going on and tries to understand and watches the presentations and looks at the data. But I think until we have a clear goal defined on what we want to accomplish with middle school redistricting, it's going to be really hard to pinpoint what that solution will be. And in addition, I think we're using the elementary sending districts as the building blocks to work on the plan, right? But I'm not sure that those elementary sending districts make a lot of sense anymore. And if you're using those unequal blocks to try to build your plan, what you end up with may not be where you actually want it to go. So I'd like to think about those issues with you all and how we get to a middle school process that looks the way that we ultimately want it to be. The third thing I think that is facing all of us is the mental health crisis that our kids are having after 2 years of a pandemic. I mean, I think we all did the best we could, right? We all muddled through as best as we could, all of us. We're talking before you came in here today about sort of our war stories, about what the past 2 years look like. But now we have a situation where we have little ones who don't really know how to interact with their peers. We have kids who are struggling socially, are struggling with mental health, aren't really sure, and things seem to keep having tons of upheaval day to day. It affects us as adults. We're not totally sure what's going to happen tomorrow, but it affects the kids too. Really good steps were made this year. I know that at Barclay, ALS PALS, which is the social emotional learning component of creative curriculum, was put into place, and I'm thankful for that. At the elementary level, Second Step, which is a great social emotional learning program, was put into place. I'd like to see more to that, and I'd like to see, especially for the older kids, opportunities for them to really talk and connect with each other. And to talk about some of the diversity and equity issues that we're seeing come out of with the older grades. Let's talk about amplifying student voice when it comes to what they need. Let's let them tell us what are the things they're struggling with, and how can we help them to work together and with the adults in their lives to move forward as best as we all can. So I think those are probably the three biggest issues facing the board right now.
Thank you. Mr. Brin.
Thank you. I think the elephant in the room, and my fellow colleagues here have discussed it a little bit, is the pandemic and how it has impacted our community over the last couple of years, how we will face it in the short term in the coming year, and how we will make investments in our school district to mitigate the impacts in the long term, whether that's through expanded mental health counseling for students and staff, or investing in our teachers and what they need in order to avoid burnout. Because I know that they've been working double, triple, quadruple time every single day since this has become an issue. Really having a conversation with our staff and what they've seen on a day-to-day basis, and figure out how we can invest in the long-term sustainability of our teachers and staff so that they can still provide the most excellent possible education for our kids, not only in this coming year, but also moving forward in the next several years. And that brings me to the bond, which is an investment in our infrastructure, which obviously we've been neglecting for a very long time now. And it's becoming more expensive and more dire the longer that we avoid it. However, since we're having that conversation now, we know that we're making the investments that will not only serve, like they said, the students who are currently in the schools, but also the students for the next decade or two. So those are the things that we're talking about right now, and those are the things that we need to consider when we're investing in the long-term future of our school district.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
So no surprise, since the few of us spoke before we started, we have lots of sort of similar ideas, and I think that there's not much disagreement. The bond certainly has been a very important part of not just the board's work, but also the wider Cherry Hill community's concerns for so long. Trying to catch up after so many years of having our district underfunded by the state is tremendously important. So certainly the bond is one of the top three, if not the most important, because if it is successful, then it feeds into all of the other issues that are important. Secondly, redistricting. Redistricting is one that has really caught a lot of public attention in the thought exchange in particular. I've seen a lot more interest in that issue than I had in some previous ones. And I think that is something that certainly the board is aware that the community is concerned about. And particularly so when there is this serious discussion about bringing all the students, particularly in option 4, into Rosa as a 6th grade only school, and having that potentially be yet another sort of emotional insult to so many of the kids. And a lot of parents are very concerned about that, as they should be, which brings me to third, and again, not much disagreement up here, mental health, but not just mental health of the students, although that should be the focus. And each of us as parents, we've seen how our own children have at times struggled, but often and ultimately succeeded in dealing with the struggles with the pandemic. But focusing on student needs in mental health counseling, but also staff, educators, the pressures that they have been under, in particular in the last couple of years, have been immense. And I am thankful that each time, at least I've been able to reach out to each of our kids' educators for issues here and there, none of them serious. They have all been able to respond quickly, respond effectively, but at the same time, we can see the stress that they're under. if the board is successful in getting the bond properly communicated to the community, if the bond proposal is successful, that will go a long way towards addressing a lot of the issues that redistricting is hoping to address. And also give all of the schools the opportunity to expand needed programs for mental health counseling, mental health support for students, for staff, to assure that the kids, as they go through, whether it's from Barclay through to the elementary schools, to middle school, to high schools, that they are not just getting smarter every year, right? That's the goal, but that they are getting and staying healthier and stronger and more resilient every year, not just the kids, but the staff. So at the end of the day, we can continue to be proud of the kids that are graduating as they move forward and come back and build their lives, hopefully, at least some of them here in Cherry Hill.
Thank you. You all touched on the next question, so I just want to give you each an additional minute with this question. What factors are important to consider in redistricting, specifically the middle schools? We'll start with Ms. Winters.
Sure, thank you so much. As I mentioned, my daughter's in fourth grade, so she'll be the first year that goes in under the new policy. My son went to Rosa through the lottery process that had previously been in place, so I have experience with both. And I think the things that need to be considered are, first of all, one thing I mentioned earlier, where I think the elementary and middle school redistricting really needs to be considered as two parts of a plan, because the middle school plans are all based on the elementary school sending areas. And I think when you look at those maps, there's definitely some places where we could think about whether neighborhoods are being lumped together correctly and what the result of that is. I know that my neighborhood elementary school where my kids go, Russell Knight, is really overcrowded right now. There's 4 kindergartens this year and 2 fifth grades. Well, next year, my daughter's class is huge. They just went from 4 to 3 classes. They're not going to be able to go down to 2. There's no more room in that school. And that's a huge problem. And additionally, when you look at the demographics, Russell Knight is the whitest elementary school in Cherry Hill by far. It's an outlier when you compare it to all the other schools. That's a problem. All 3 of my kids, like I mentioned, started at Barclay. And one of the best parts about Barclay, there's so many great things about Barclay, but one of the best parts is that Barclay pulls from the whole district. So you get a better vision when you're at Barclay of what the district actually looks like. And the district is awesome. It's a diverse district with all kinds of people. And that's one of the beautiful things about that school. The school's also 40% special needs, which really gives you a sense of kids learning how to be and grow and work and learn together in diverse environments. That is an asset, that is a benefit, and that's something that we should be looking towards as we look to our elementary schools and our middle schools and our high schools. How are we carrying that strength forward as we move forward as a district? So, I mean, I think that's definitely something that we want to consider, but I think it has to be looked at as all pieces of the same plan. I also think something that hasn't been brought forth is the intersection between the bond and the redistricting, right? Because if you have an overcrowded elementary school, here are the ways you solve that problem. You can redistrict so that you're moving kids around, right? So the school maybe isn't so crowded, or you can add capacity. If you look at the middle school plans, a lot of those plans, the issue was what? Rosa doesn't have the capacity. Rosa's 4 kids over in this plan. Rosa's 7 kids over in that plan. We're working on a bond. I mean, if you're talking about expanding capacity and ways to use the space, this is the moment to think about these things together and bring synergy to it. And I think that's something that definitely needs to be considered. You know, they're not 2 separate pieces. There's something that needs to be considered in tandem so that you can move forward with a comprehensive solution that gets the board where it wants to go, right? With what our school should look like and what our schools reflect for us as a town. So I think that's really important. One other thought that I had is just that I feel like student and staff voice has not been considered when talking about redistricting. So the day you guys actually considered it, I happened to have my parent-teacher conference at Rosa. So I walked in, and first of all, because I'm a new middle school parent, I had no idea I was going to be facing all of my son's middle school teachers in the LC at once. I thought I was going to see one science teacher, and there was a panel of teachers looking at me like, let's talk about John. But at the end of the meeting, which was a great meeting, I sort of mentioned, because we had a few more minutes, that you were considering middle school redistricting. None of those teachers in the room knew that was even on the agenda. And in fact, one of the teachers in the room had been an original teacher at Rosa when Rosa was reopened. and had a wealth of background information and historical knowledge about why Rosa was reopened and what Rosa looked like and what it was intended to be and how it interacted with the other middle schools. I feel like that's just an untapped resource moving forward. I think that there's a lot of interest in this, as other people have said, and I think that maybe the discussion needs to be broadened. I would love to know personally what students at East and West who went to the different middle schools think about that experience now and what they think about the Rosa Lottery and looking back. Have we asked them? And what would they have to say about it? Do they have ideas about maybe what it should look like going forward? And have we considered that? And the last thing I'll just say, and maybe this is a little bit selfishly as a parent who's about to go through it, is that these kids have been through a lot. They've really been through a lot in the past few years. They're struggling. They're struggling to make friends. They're struggling to make connections. Activities have finally resumed this year, but last year, my son would get on the bus with 4 other kids and go to Rosa, and he didn't know anybody, and it was hard to connect. And then he came home and just, did the rest of it in his room. That's really hard for kids. I don't know if solutions that are really going to break up neighborhoods, break up elementary schools, bus kids to a 6th grade center and then break them up again. I think that's maybe some of the reaction we're getting from families. We're sort of circling the wagons around our kids and saying our kids are really struggling. Let's think about the real life impact that this is going to have on them. Not that that should determine your solution entirely, but I definitely think it's something that parents are thinking about when we're considering this after a 2-year disruption of a pandemic. So those are kind of my thoughts on the middle school redistricting. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me do this. Let me take out the time limit. I said earlier, I want to make sure there's some equity to deal with this issue. Very important issue of our time. Thank goodness we have Ms. Friedel to, push us forward with it. Forget the 1 minute, take the time you need, Mr. Britt.
Thank you so much. I think the number one issue with redistricting, of course, as you said, we're dealing with a situation where parents and students have dealt with a lot of change, a lot of pressure, a lot of things that have just kind of overwhelmed them throughout their lives over the last couple of years. And regardless of the decision that the board decides to make in terms of who goes where, which neighborhoods are cut up into which schools, ultimately, we're going to have to create a very solid communication plan for all of the students and the parents who are affected so that they know where they're going, what that means, and how to deal with that situation. As a parent, I know the communication from Horace Mann has been fantastic about all the different initiatives and things that are going on at that school. I just think that when it comes to redistricting, before we make any major decisions, or once we do make a major decision, we would need to sit down and identify everybody who is impacted by that decision and who's going to these schools and changing schools to make sure that they have an action plan and they understand that they have a support system in place so that they know that they have a place to go in order to deal with any issues that might arise with that change.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think first and foremost, you can almost take the word redistricting out. The middle schools are schools. And the first priority of any school, and there's 3 middle schools, has to be that they have to be equal. There has to be equity in the curriculum. There has to be equity in the faces that are in the seats of the students. That has to reflect the wider Cherry Hill community. So for me, what would be most important is assuring that each of the 3 middle schools does just that. That whether it's Beck, Carusi, or Rosa, at the end of the day, each of the students in each of the classes has the benefit of the perspectives of the entire community of Cherry Hill, not just of a particular segment or a majority segment. So equity is to me the most important element in redistricting with respect to the 5 options that are part of the plan right now. That's the one that has always spoken to me. What at the end of the day would provide each of the students the best education, the widest perspective from each of the various sub-communities in Cherry Hill, because at the end of the day, we're one community. Right now, that's not necessarily the case at all of the schools. This is an opportunity to do that. the schools, there should certainly be plenty of healthy competition between Beck, Carusi, and Rosa. When they're playing each other in basketball, soccer, that's fine. But when they walk out of the schools after they've graduated 8th grade, they all should have been given the opportunity and the benefit of learning and of hearing the perspectives of their various student populations. That is the best way to assure that they will be successful as they move on to high school East or high school West. There should not be, whether it is real or not, any perception that one school has a better program than another, that one school is more representative of the wider Cherry Hill community than another. So for me, number one is assuring that there is equitable distribution of the students throughout, and doing so, however, in a way that is as that has the least physical impact to the students as possible. Physical as far as trying to assure as the shorter transportation routes. That may not always be possible. Some students may have longer bus runs, but to try and reduce that as much as possible, and to try and reduce any, again, we've all said the same thing in one way or another. The students have been through so much, right? And it's not over. It's time for all of us, whether we're parents and we have one kid in the house, or we have 4, or we have none. It is time for the community to get behind the students and support them, and not do something that is going to increase their stress levels any more than they already are. So while any form of redistricting is going to have some negative impact, I think it needs to be front and center that the board should find the way to achieve the most equity with the least additional stress on the kids.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur.
Okay, so the idea of the redistricting in the middle school and the elementary school level completely fascinates me. It's something that I've followed very closely since the idea first came on the scene. Like I said, I grew up in the district, so I was here prior to school choice being a thing. In my opinion, I think that school choice was put into place to solve one problem, but created more problems. The idea that we have one school that is overcrowded and we have a ton of kids flocking to one school because it's touted as the best school in town. Realtors will tell you, don't worry, buy a house wherever you want. You can school choice to East, and then we have this other school, West, which is an amazing high school. People get a fantastic education there, but we have a PR problem where we have people choosing East because it has a better rap sheet. It has a better score on whatever realtor website they looked at. So when I think about the middle school redistricting, those issues are what pops into my head. The idea that if we make Rosa a districted sending school, will those children automatically gravitate towards East? Then do we have 2 full middle schools of kids trying to go to East and one going to West? So, I mean, I know I am in the minority on this, but I don't think that the 6th grade center is something that needs to be taken off the table immediately. Because I think that the idea of the kids coming together for 6th grade, experiencing 6th grade together, and then some kids going to Carusi, some kids going to Beck, and those schools rising up to the high schools. And yes, we can still keep school choice there for people that may want a particular reason, may want a particular program, but kids like to stay with their friends. My 4th grader told me this afternoon, well, I'll probably go to Carusi because you went there, but so-and-so, she said she's going to Rosa. And I was like, well, Lil, that might not be a choice, when you go to middle school. And she's like, what do you mean? So, I mean, she's in 4th grade. Obviously, maybe this other child's parents weren't talking about this. But I think that that's a communication issue too, because these 4th graders still think that that's going to be a thing, which means their parents think it's going to be a thing. So we need to make sure that we communicate the changes that are coming to the district, and that we really look at this as a big picture. Like Gina was saying about I can't imagine doing the middle schools and then looking at the elementary schools, because all of that work to put our middle schools where they should be gets erased when we change the populations of the elementary schools. So it's a hard topic. It's not going to be an easy topic. There are going to be people that are very upset with when things change, when their schools change, when their sending schools change. I think it's really important to try our best to make sure that if the child starts in a school, they can finish in that school, because I know with all of the changes in the last few years, it's a really important topic with parents right now. But I look forward to, whether I am on the board or not, following this topic and seeing what we do with this, because this is a once in a generation chance to fix some of the major problems we have with our school populations. Thank you.
Thank you. You've all done very well. Let me forecast a little bit of what's ahead. I'm going to ask you a question. This question, minute or two, whatever you think does it justice. I'm then going to ask you to wrap up with a question. I'm going to go a little bit out of order, but it'll work out. Mr. Bryn, as at some point in your board service to the district and community, it is likely that neighbors and or friends, I'm going to say and friends, will not agree with your position on a critical issue. How will you handle that?
Fantastic question. I pride myself on the ability to speak with constituents on a daily basis in a way that makes them feel included and heard and understood. I think that it's important as a board member to speak to as many advocates across any issue as you can, so that you can get a full perspective from everybody who is interested or this issue particularly affects. I love having those conversations. It's literally my favorite thing in the world. So if people disagree with the decision of the board, I think that it is important to go back to the board to discuss what those disagreements are, so that we can create a communications plan, not just for the people who are expressing it out loud, but probably because that particular issue might be, we might not be hearing from the greater number of people who are actually upset about whatever decision that we've made. So ultimately, communication, I think, is what we need to do. And talking to the members of the community and being a board member who sees and understands that people are going to be upset regardless of the decisions that we make, whether they're the best for the district, which we hope the decisions that we make are the best for the district. Ultimately, we'll need to communicate with them, listen, make those people feel heard, and bring them to the table so that they can continue to have conversations about how we can further improve the district.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I often introduce myself as a recovering litigator after almost 30 years as a prosecutor and courtroom trial lawyer. So I'm used to having lots of disagreements. However, I have also always prided myself on the ability to truly listen to another opinion, listen to those who disagree, sometimes forcefully. And just as an example, some years ago, during one of my last roles, I was representing a large company that was not very well liked by lots of attorney generals in the United States and by the federal government. They saw, and I was their representative at the time, went out to a meeting in first in Washington and then Chicago, was seen as sort of, in their mind, I represented the enemy. Within a day or two of meetings, I was the only one that they were specifically calling and asking back for more meetings, because I was able to help them understand that there were no enemies, there were no adversaries, that we were all trying to find better answers to better questions to help constituents and build a consensus across boundaries which were previously thought to be unbreakable. I have always felt comfortable listening to adversaries, listening to those who disagree with me personally, disagree with friends of mine, and been able to engage them in conversation, not successfully always engage in conversation, but certainly always been willing to listen and willing to change opinions, my own, if necessary, if I felt that perhaps my perspective was not correct after getting a wider fund of information and different perspectives, but also help others. And I feel, if confronted as a member of the board with a board decision that a particular resident didn't agree with, is something I would expect. I wouldn't necessarily say welcome it, but maybe you do welcome, because that's what we're all involved in a conversation. It's at some point. This is about our children, and there are going to be strong opinions. And I would certainly expect those to be voiced. I would look forward to the opportunity to engage those conversations, discussions, bring them to the board where necessary. But certainly not shy away from them, and not shy away from making decisions or helping the board make decisions, which we know at the time may not be necessarily the most popular for everyone. It's not a popularity contest. It's about ultimately what we believe is in the best interests of the students in the district.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur.
I think that this is kind of a twofold situation. I feel like a lot of times when people come to you with a problem, especially if you're on the board and it's somebody you personally know, they're looking at it from the lens of their personal situation. So that situation may not bode well for whatever decision the district made. So I think being able to come at it with these are the reasons that something happened. This is the expert opinions. This is the research behind the decisions that were made is super important, because a lot of times people don't understand the why something happened. They just know the what. I also think the other part of this question is that sometimes boards in general are privy to information that the general public isn't. So you need to be prepared to not be able to answer a question that your neighbor thinks that you might be able to, like, hey, can you get me in on that? You need to be able to say, well, this is my job, and be able to draw that line in the sand where someone personally, you have family, you have friends in the district, but you also have a responsibility to everybody in the district when you're willing to step into this role as a board member.
Thank you. Ms. Winters.
So I think for me, I would draw on the experience I had working for the legislature, because my job was nonpartisan staff. So I served both parties, both houses. And it was the greatest thing, because I got to hear all different perspectives all the time. And part of what I did was work to craft policy solutions that would bridge those differences and create consensus. And additionally, which is what I mentioned before, bringing the public in. So we did a lot of committee meetings and public hearings, and sometimes opinions had to change. Sometimes a perspective would be brought forward, or an unintended consequence that you hadn't thought of before. So that's the second thing I would say. I think if I were a board member, my goal would be to listen more than I talk, at least initially, because I feel like I don't know what the lived experience is of a student walking through East on a daily basis. I don't know what the lived experience is of all my neighbors and friends. I mean, I think especially in the pandemic over the past 2 years, one thing that we all learned was we were all in it together, but our experiences were not the same, right? If you were a family who English wasn't your first language, your experience of remote learning was maybe a lot more challenging. If you were a family like my family with a child with special needs, maybe you had challenges in that direction that other people weren't facing. Some people said it was going great, and some people said it was a disaster, and both those things were true. So I think as a board member who's representing the whole district, I would seek to listen and look for understanding. And hey, look, there's no answer that's going to please everybody, especially when you're drawing boundary lines, right? Somebody's always going to be on the other side of the line from where they wanted to be. But I think as long as you listen intentionally, you try to hear everybody out and build consensus, and then ultimately move forward with what you think is the best decision for the district as a whole to serve all of its people, then that's the best you can do at the end of the day. And I would endeavor to be that person if I were on the board.
Thank you. This brings us to our final question, and it's probably one you'd expect. Mr. Mayor, we're going to start with you. What strengths do you bring to the board, and why should we select you this evening?
Listen, I am, as I said earlier, I'm never afraid. I've never shied away from 3 words that many professionals won't use, such as "I don't know." I feel that's one of my strengths, is to be able to say, "I don't know." But I know how to find that answer. I know how to help others find answers and engage conversations. I've always been particularly comfortable in various roles, working with small committees, large groups, leadership positions, and as subordinate team member in helping to support whatever project goals were set out. And doing so while actively engaging and trying to get opposing points of view, opposing positions, because at the end of the day, a decision that a board makes or a decision that an individual might make is really most effective where it has had, where you've had the opportunity to truly listen and engage various perspectives and points of views. So I've been comfortable always doing that throughout my career, and I look forward to doing so as a member of the Board of Education. I am fortunate now to have the time to spend and the energy to spend with the board. This is not the first time that I have thought seriously about trying to become a member of the board, but realistically, in years past, I knew I didn't have the time to devote that I would want to devote, because I would be called away. I would be traveling for work. And when I was home, I would hope to be as present as possible for my kids. Sometimes, frankly, I was not as successful as I should have been. I have that opportunity now and will for the foreseeable future, the opportunity to truly engage with members of the board, with members of the community, to help identify different paths forward and to help keep Cherry Hill at the forefront of what is considered one of the very best school districts in New Jersey. One of the reasons why so many people still want to come and live in Cherry Hill, despite the the occasional complaints here and there. I look forward to that opportunity, and this is it's a good time for me to do this. The pandemic has helped focus my efforts in seeing the struggles that not just our children have gone through, but their friends have gone through. And to be a part of helping everybody move forward is something that I have a passion for, and would certainly like the opportunity to move forward.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur?
I think that one of my strongest assets as a person in general is that I'm going to read everything that comes across my desk. I am going to read every word in an email that you send me. I am going to read every page on a policy memo. And I have a strong attention to detail. It's why I'm good with finance and spreadsheets and numbers and data, because I want to understand how it all works and why trends are happening. I read through and printed out the demographic study that was passed, that was sent out last May or March. And I was just fascinated by the numbers to see which schools are overcrowded, which schools are undercrowded, which schools are more diverse, which schools aren't, and what we can do about that and move those numbers around. I'm also really good at knowing when I don't know the answer. I'm not an education expert. We have those, and we have incredible educators in this district. That is not where my strong suits are, and I know that, so I can defer to the experts when needed. And I'm more than willing to listen to what they have to say and understand it so that I can then confidently make whatever decision needs to be made, knowing that I have all of that information available to me. I think that my passion and dedication to Cherry Hill as a town in general, not just the school district, is something that will help me champion this district, while also my professional expertise or something that will help me hold them accountable. So you're not a yes man. You can say, like, Cherry Hill is an amazing place to live. It's an amazing place to educate our students, but this is what we can do better, and this is how we can do it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Winters?
So I've talked a lot about my professional background tonight. My graduate work was all in education policy, education finance. My work at the Education Law Center, which has to do specifically with school facilities, which is directly relevant to the work you're doing right now. I work for the legislature as nonpartisan staff, which gave me a lot of experience synthesizing public opinion and putting it into public policy that works. But what I haven't discussed is the fact that for the past 10 years since I left the legislature, I was the director of youth ministry for Holy Eucharist Church right here in Cherry Hill. And the cool thing about our church is we actually draw from all 3 middle schools and the 2 high schools. So for a solid decade, I've been working with the youth of Cherry Hill in that capacity. So I know them. And that's been, I think, one of the greatest strengths I would bring to the table, not just knowing my own kids and their schools and what they're doing, but also having that lived in community experience where I've taught and I've seen how things have changed. And when I first started as youth minister, they all had flip phones. Nobody had an iPhone. I watched it grow and I watched it happen. And I know, I've known great groups of kids from Carusi and great groups of kids from Beck and great groups of kids from West. And all those kids have been part of my experience. And I think that's part of what motivated me to come forward now, partially because, as Joel said, I have the time now because God willing, my kid is going to full day kindergarten next year, which I'm so excited about because I was on the kindergarten curriculum committee. That sort of gave me my boost of confidence to put myself forward in this because that was a great experience I had. But it's not just about my 3 kids, right, and their experience. It's about all the kids that I worked with over a decade of community activism through my church that sort of made me realize that, I've been doing a lot of talking to my friends and my neighbors behind the scenes about what y'all have been doing and what you're discussing and what's going on. But maybe it was time that I tried to put myself out there and talk about what's best for the whole community. And I hope that if you select me, that I'll be a great partner in doing that as a team together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Bryn.
Thank you so much again to the board for taking the time to listen to all of these candidates for this position. The key word that I would like to leave you with from my own perspective is empathy. I think that the most important quality that a board member can have is empathy for the various advocates that we'll be dealing with on a regular basis. So whether that's the students who every single day are going into the schools and doing their best to learn and achieve academically, whether it's the staff and especially the teachers who are giving it their all every single day and have their own unique perspectives about what works in the classroom and what needs to happen in order to achieve the academic goals that we set forth for them, or whether it's the administrators who got into this honestly to do the very best they could intrinsically to try to help the district get where it needs to be and make those difficult decisions to move us forward and make sure that every kid has an opportunity. My entire background has been in dealing with the public, with public policy issues. I've always been an advocate and joined organizations or fought for causes that I've truly believed in. And I can't think of a cause that I believe in more than improving the Cherry Hill School Districts, not just for my own kid, but for all of the children who go to these schools. So again, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to get up here and to speak about my own experience and what I can contribute to the board. And if chosen, I look forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you so much, and the best of luck with your decision. There's 4 great candidates here.
Thank you. I agree. You guys are great candidates. So from here, the board is going to convene tonight. We will hopefully arrive at a decision. You will all hear from Mrs. Sugars, as you did about tonight, tomorrow. We will for sure announce the 9th member of this board on February 8th. There is a bit of a process that you need to do. Our hope is to seat the successful candidate on February 8th, if not as soon as possible after that. But all of that information will be clear in what you hear tomorrow. Really appreciate your time, your engagement. I know we will see all 4 of you again, and I am excited about that. And so have a wonderful night, and we are going to move into our our action meeting. And so feel free to stay, but we would understand if you wanted to call it a night. Up to you. Thank you again. All right. We promised action for our action meeting, and action we shall have. With no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash for a board recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Ovadia. This is an exciting evening for us to do a little board recognition, and also, as exciting as it is, it's with a little bit of sadness. But I am thrilled to take a few moments to honor Mrs. Lynn Vospikian. And Lynn, if you would come up to the podium and meet me up there. As Lynn is walking up, Lynn Vospikian is currently an assistant principal at Rosa Middle School. She's been in the district a number of years. All of the years that she has worked for us have been at Rosa in a couple of different positions, and she's retiring at the end of this month. So next Monday, the 31st of January, is her last day in district. So as we do with the administrators, we are thrilled to recognize Lynn this evening, and then I'm going to bring this over for you. And we have this crystalline figure. Mrs. Wilson tells me that's what it is. At the top, it says Inspire, and it says Making the Difference, awarded to Lynn Vospikian in appreciation of your years of outstanding service and dedication. Thank you for truly making a difference. Cherry Hill Public Schools, October 2005 to January 2022. So congratulations, Lynn. I'm going to bring this over to you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Malash asked if I wanted to say a few words, which for those of you that know me, I always have a few words. I just briefly want to thank the Board of Ed, thank Dr. Malash, our administrative staff, my colleagues in the district, the Cherry Hill community. As a Cherry Hill parent and teacher, administrator, active community member, I'm very proud to stand here. While I'm sad to leave, it has been a tremendous honor and pleasure to serve Cherry Hill schools and the Cherry Hill community. Very grateful for those of you that sit in these seats. I know the hard work that goes into your jobs. I will take that in my heart and treasure it. And I will now be sitting in the audience as a community member and plan to remain active. We have some serious issues, obviously, on the table after listening to our candidates tonight. And I will continue to be active and involved, but I'm forever grateful, Dr. Malash, for the opportunity you gave me here in the district. So thank you so much.
Congratulations and thank you, Lynn. And we are sure that we are going to see you around.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over next to Dr. Malash for middle school redistricting thought exchange presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ovadia. As I get ready, Mrs. Wilson is going to share a little presentation that we put together. As you recall, we launched a thought exchange regarding the discussion about middle school redistricting. This was launched back in December, and it closed recently, last Friday. But we wanted to give the board and the community just an update on what was shared through the thought exchange. And as we do that, also to remind folks that we have a community town hall scheduled for tomorrow evening. It'll take place in the library annex at High School East from 7 to 9 p.m. At that time, it's an opportunity for the board to hear from members of the community. People can attend in person. There's a Zoom link to the town hall as well, so they can attend online if they want to do that. So we'll just go through. So thought exchange summary, middle school boundary realignment presented to the board. Mrs. Wilson and I are going through that right now. And again, as a reminder, the thought exchange opened on December the 7th after Mrs. Wethington and her committee delivered their initial presentation to the board regarding middle school redistricting. This was the primary question that was asked in the thought exchange. And it says, now that you have viewed the middle school redistricting presentation, What thoughts do you have about the recommended options 4 and 5, which are now being considered by the board? So as we closed the thought exchange last Friday evening, as a total, we had 748 participants. Those 748 participants, they shared 933 thoughts, and there were a total of 23,336 ratings of those thoughts. And for those of you that are not familiar with the thought exchange, it is an opportunity for people in a moderated setting to share their perspective. There's anonymity when they type in their thoughts, and then the thoughts are there, and everybody else that logs into it, they can then rate those thoughts and about whether they agree with them or they disagree with them. And then there's an analysis that takes place within the system. We had a number of different participant groups, and I just wanted to share what those participant groups look like. The first of which is a parent whose youngest child is not in school yet. There were 60 of those folks. They shared 58 thoughts and did 840 ratings. And again, you can see on the screen, they will all look relatively the same or similar in terms of the structure. The numbers will be different. About the number of the 60 participants who identified themselves as their youngest child not being in school, 25 of them shared thoughts, 36 of them rated thoughts, and 47 of them explored the thoughts that were there. For the group whose youngest child attends preschool, there were 83 participants. They shared 113 thoughts, 1,785 ratings. Parent whose youngest child attends elementary school, there were 366 participants. 523 thoughts came from this group, and they participated with 15,653 ratings. This was the largest individual group that we had participate in this thought exchange. Parent whose youngest child attends middle school, 128 participants shared 156 thoughts. They made 4,206 ratings. Parent whose youngest child attends high school, 31 participants. They shared 28 thoughts, and they made 257 ratings. And then finally, the final category, or I'm sorry, this is the second to last category, the community member with no children in school. There were 39 participants who shared 33 thoughts, and then they went through and identified 198 ratings of thoughts. Only 9 of that group of 39 actually submitted a thought. Then the final group, folks that identified themselves as staff members in the Cherry Hill schools. 41 participants, they shared 22 thoughts, made 367 ratings. Of those 41 participants who came through the first part of the survey, only 12 of them shared thoughts. Now, the system thought exchange, there's an artificial intelligence that is used, and it goes through and analyzes all of the information that folks type in, the messages they put. They put together a word cloud from the top rated thoughts that were shared. And in the word cloud, these are the words that came up most often. The larger words appeared more often than any of the other words in the top rated thoughts. Then the key thoughts. Of the 933 thoughts that were shared during this thought exchange, these ranked as number 1, number 2, and number 3 in terms of the ratings and the agreement with the thought that was shared. The top thought was transportation for the 6th graders to a center would result in many kids having extremely long bus rides. Behavior problems that occur on school buses typically are exacerbated the longer amount of time a student spends on the bus. The second thought out of the 933, I absolutely am against having Rosa be only a 6th grade school where my 6th grader would have to move to another school. Not right. These children have just started to have some normalcy in their lives belonging to a school community, and you want to take that away from them. And the third rated thought, moving 6th to one school is a terrible idea. I moved back to Cherry Hill so my kids could walk to both middle school and high school. Then there were the next area that they shared the thoughts in terms of ratings were categorized with 6th graders. Now, I just want to point out that there in 2 of these, actually in all 3 of them, the term grandfather is used. As a school district, we do not use the term grandfathering because of the origination of the term that really started to become used more prevalently after the adoption of the 15th Amendment. It was used in terms of allowing some folks to be able to continue to vote while other folks would not be able to vote. It developed more than 130 years ago in the United States. So as a district, we will not use that term. You will not hear our staff members or the folks that present use that term as it comes through, but it was shared in some of these thoughts. So again, just part of our process to help to educate people. We'd like to see that not being used. The third category was about splitting Barton and what the impact of one of the suggestions was in terms of splitting Barton as an elementary school and the kids would go to middle school. Change, again, a word that came up quite frequently, the impact of change, these three thoughts. Time, and again, time in these instances focused a lot on the amount of time the children would spend on a school bus, depending upon what the options indicated. And then these were the categories in this bar graph that shows as the analysis of the information, these are the themes that were broken down. And you heard from some of the, or you saw some of the thoughts that came through. So just to point out, as you look at the bar graph, starting on the left-hand side in that blue bar, which does look blue, it says no sixth grade center in terms of frequency. Current middle school students finish at their school. Curriculum and extracurricular activities, teachers, stability, students' mental health, equity, special education, transportation, geographic proximity should determine sending area, unfair to Barton or Knight families, consider option 1, and then ones that were considered to be unthemed that just did not seem to have another spot where they fit, reinstate the Rosa selection process. Option 5, yes, and yes to a sixth grade center, option 4. And then the wrap up, thanks for participating. And we are thankful for everyone that took the time to participate in the thought exchange. It really does, in terms of the analysis, the analytics that come through, provides a good snapshot of what's being perceived and what's being experienced and what the thoughts are for the people that participate from our community. And again, in this instance, with those 7 different groups in terms of what they shared. Again, we want to encourage folks to participate tomorrow evening in the town hall. It really is an opportunity. One of the focuses of the work that the Board of Education has been doing throughout this has been to have opportunity to listen and to dialogue with folks in the community. Because of the structure, the way the board meetings run, it's really not set up as a dialogue for the community and the board. At a time like the town hall meetings, it can be more of an exchange, more folks can get the opportunity to talk. And we will be focusing solely on the middle school or redistricting discussion during the town hall meeting tomorrow evening. There'll also be a town hall meeting that'll be all virtual on Thursday, Thursday, February the 3rd. My brain just seems to be leaping ahead really far. Thursday, February the 3rd, which is next Thursday. We're going to focus that discussion again on middle school redistricting. It will be all virtual, and we're going to target that discussion for families with children who have an IEP or a 504. And again, Mrs. Wilson will continue to push out that information. We will ask our principals to continue to share the information. I know that they've been sharing about the town halls coming up. And Mr. Avati, back to you.
Okay, so this falls in our system under P&L. Ms. Friedel, would you see if there, can you see if board members have? Where's Ms.? Oh, there you are. Okay. Would you see if, do you want to just see if there are board members and can call them and anyone who wants to share some thoughts here?
Are there any board members who want to share any thoughts? Ms. Stern?
So it's really interesting just to see kind of this initial sharing of, community thought. I'm really excited about that. And I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night. And I really, I want to say, I think I've heard a lot of, very similar themes, and I think that's wonderful. We want to keep hearing them. And I really look forward to also hearing, some of the other input from the community. And I think we want to really take it as a very broad listening view and then take that information back for, our discussions. So Just, that's it. Thanks.
Mr. Avadia, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, so just in talking to people as I do, and in some of the stuff we've seen, there are people who are going to want to express that someone who starts at a school continued through the end. And I appreciate that words have meaning and are critically important to expression. How would we advise, to keep it the right way, so people can express this thought, which I know we've heard quite a bit of.
So we're gonna have like I said, the town hall meetings. We'll also be launching a dedicated email address, much like we did with the discussion about the buildings and the work, where we have plan@chclc.org. We'll have a dedicated email address that will be, Mrs. Wilson, just with this. The email address that it's not live yet. All right, so not to confuse people, we'll announce it tomorrow night and then post it afterwards. But we'll have a dedicated email address that people will be able to send in information.
I'm tripping over this question. Let's say we'll just take Carusi, kid who's in Carusi. So, people have referred to this, as he mentioned, as grandfather. There's a history to that, and we don't want that. How do people express it? Like, what's the right language around that?
Oh, you mean if what should they say instead of grandfather? Just that they want the kids to be able to finish where they start, right? That they want them to have that opportunity. Just to be clear about what it is that they mean, that they wanted to apply to everybody after their child, or everybody, starting in a certain year or something like that. I apologize. I was not looking down that path at all.
I don't see any other hands. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Fleischer.
Thank you so much. The question I actually had, I've been hearing from a lot of people who are not in favor of the sixth grade center and who want to have a sixth, seventh, and eighth grade at Carusi, Beck, and Rosa. One of the biggest requests they're having is that they don't really fit into any of the options. They don't want any of the schools to have to split up into, like, so far, the one that is the main one is Barton right now. So the question I'm getting from a lot of parents and families is there another way that we can reconfigure this? And this may be for a different time or discussion, but just to put it out there, that's the biggest thing I'm hearing, is that they don't want any elementary school split if they were to do a sixth, seventh, and eighth grade at all three of the middle schools. Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Fleischer. Yeah, that's definitely a future discussion with the board.
So I'll just add onto that real quick, is that I think that the conversation about the elementary redistricting and the middle school really do have to be in tandem, as has been mentioned. If we're going to look at certain neighborhoods going to an elementary school, should we be looking at that also for the middle school, so that we're not making a switch for the middle school that then the elementary schools aren't going to fall into? I'm sorry, Dr. Malash, perhaps that's already been looked at, but I just think it needs to be on the table. Mrs. Tong?
Yeah, I just want to add something. I think you guys have mentioned about the elementary school redistricting possibly, and then the middle school. I think we should look both of them together, if that might be, so that when we district them, it helps each of them, I guess the future, they prepare for it. Right now, everything's in the air. I think it's very tough for them if people want to move into Cherry Hill. They don't know where to go. So I think just give a little more input from every one of us and from the community, please do so. It will be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Vadia, I do not see any more hands.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Friedel. With that, I will turn it back to Dr. Malash for improvement plan project applications.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. So this time, Mrs. Sugars is going to just give an update in terms, and this builds on the discussion that took place last Tuesday evening on the 18th of January. If you recall, Mr. Garrison was with us, Mr. Salamini, Mr. Rob Nolte, and Ms. Sherry, Tracy Sherry from Phoenix Advisors were all with us, representing many of the professionals that we've worked with over the course of more than a year to prepare the information regarding the projects that we believe need to be done within the district. So after that meeting last week and input and feedback that was provided, our professionals got together again last week and went through the projects, and we've made some tweaks overall to what the information is regarding the projects that we would like the board to act on this evening, so that we can submit the project applications to the state. So Mrs. Sugars is going to go through and deliver this. This presentation will be up on the website tomorrow. Our tech folks, all the presentations that are given this evening will be posted on the district website tomorrow, probably midday-ish, early afternoon. I'm not sure what else our folks have going on, but by midday it should be up, so people will be able to take a look at this. And then we'll have a little discussion after Mrs. Sugars goes through this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. First of all, I just want to say that it's very exciting after what feels like a very long road to get here, to be approving these applications this evening. This is just one more step. This is one more step towards the finalization of a bond referendum for September or October. So we're going to start, first of all, we're going to go back to the pie charts that we used last week, and we're going to talk about what we changed from last week to now. You can see here that there are deductions in many of the different categories that we talked about last week. Overall, it equates to about $4 million in deductions, and we have a list here of how we got from our original total one cost down to our revised total level one costs. And so the biggest thing that we did is, as we went through the numbers, is there were a number of improvements that were included to our Marl Crest complex. That is our facilities office, our warehouse, our tech office is housed out there. We removed those items. There's no state funding. There's no advantage to doing it through the referendum process other than, spreading out the cost. So some of the work that was proposed in there, we're actually already working on. And a lot of it we can do through our operating and our capital budget. Our Marl Crest complex is a circa 1920s, 1930s building. So yes, there is an original boiler that needs to be replaced. So there is work that needs to be done there. However, we can address that through other avenues besides the referendum. The next item that we took out was water fountain replacement. We have been working on that since Mr. Garrison did his original assessment. And so we will continue to do that through our normal procedures. And so we took those items out of the budget. In addition, we had some money in there for a fire alarm upgrade at Malberg. We've already completed that work, so we will remove that. And then some of the site work that we had in there at Beck and Payne, we're actually doing some of that work. It's part of capital reserve funds that we budgeted last year in the 21-22 budget. We'll be completing that work over the summer. So we took some of that work out as well because it was a duplicate. So we could get our level one cost down to just shy of $304 million. So that was about a $4 million reduction there. Moving on to level two, again, starting with Mr. Garrison's original pie chart that we have here, the different costs that were in level two. We were able to reduce that almost $2 million. And the areas that we took from there, we had $800,000 budgeted for improvements to the East Cafeterias. We've done a lot of work in the East Cafeterias. We have worked on the flooring, we have repainted, we put up a mural. I'm not quite sure what we would have spent $800,000 on. There are still some things that we would like to do in both of those rooms. So we took some of the funding out of that. Exterior lighting, we have been working with PSE&G and we'll continue to complete those items that way. And then we had money in there for kitchen equipment. Our kitchens do need upgrades and we do need to replace some of that equipment, but we will use food service and capital funds to complete those items. So we were able to reduce level 2 down to just shy of 58 million, so you can see there. And then finally, our level 3, we took a look at some of the things that we did there. We were able to, again, just about $2 million take out of that section as well. And the big thing, I know we had a lot of feedback about the monument signs, so we removed all the monument signs. I think we probably would still like to do them at the high schools, but again, we could do that either through capital or through our operating budget. We had some money in there. If we proceed with the work at Carusi, we will have to use temporary classroom units. We'll have to restore the area that those units were housed because they probably will be there for, a considerable amount of time. But we can look at that and address that through the operating budget. We had added some covered patio areas that had come up through some of our discussions with the public. Again, I think that's something that we can do through our operating budget. And we had added some additional parking areas, both at Man and Stockton. This would have been new work that was added. We reduced those as well as I think as part of the process, we can address that through our operating budget as well. So we were able to bring those costs down in that section as well. And if we look at a summary of that, you can see that we took down just a little over $8 million from the original probable cost that we were talking about, down to $395 million worth of projects. And you can see the various categories there that we made the reductions in. And if we go back and we look at our tax impact, another thing that we wanted to go back and revisit, we had spoke last week about the use of capital reserve funds to offset some of the tax impact. This is the original numbers that we started with, the 403 million. And we were contributing $3 million of capital reserve money towards that on an annual basis. And that brought the tax impact on the average assessed home to $426, as you can see there. So we went back and took a second look at that. And with the revised numbers, the cost estimate, $395 million, with a $4 million capital reserve contribution, and we were able to get that number down to $387. So a reduction of about $40 there. So those are the changes that we have made from our meeting last week. The board had asked us to kind of go back and take a look at things and kind of shave things and revisit things as we could. So that's where we stand right now. We have the applications on the agenda this evening to be approved. And again, that's one more step. Still have lots of steps to go, but that's one more step towards getting towards our bond referendum. Are there any questions?
Ms. Sugars and Mr. Roddick, can I just add, and thank you, Mr. Sugars, for going through that piece just before I take questions. Just a reminder to folks, so when we ask you to approve the project applications this evening, it's for all the work that could possibly be done, right? The actual question, how this will be presented to the community and what ultimately and finally will be included will be determined later in this spring, right? So everything that's included tonight is everything that could potentially be done in a referendum. Everything has to be included in here. Now, when we come down in the springtime and the board decides we're going to do one question, but you know what? We are going to pull this project, or we're not going to include this piece. That's when that ultimately is decided. That's not decided at the table tonight. What's decided tonight is that anything that could potentially be done as part of the referendum has to be approved this evening so that we can submit it to the state and receive the state approval for it. This is not the end of the discussion for the board or for the community, frankly, about what that looks like and what that means. Okay?
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that up. I feel a little bit better about that. I do, so some of the things I actually do want to do
Yeah, that's absolutely the intent that I think it also gives us flexibility because we can start looking at those projects sooner rather than later. We don't have to wait for bond referendum and to get into that process. You know, that's something that we could take a look at, doing in a different timeline. So if you recall, when we put together the 21-22 budget, we approved through the Capital Projects Fund, continuing with our ADA work. And our focus of our ADA work is to the front entrance of the building. So we've already committed funds to do that. We're already in the design process for that. So it was duplicated in the referendum. So we just removed that piece because we know that we're moving ahead with that piece over the summer. Yes. Yep.
I have a question about the ADA. Just want to make sure, I know there's some money taken out from, I'm not sure if that include the ADA or not include the ADA compliances or.
We didn't make any cuts to the ADA work. All of the original ADA work that we spoke about is still included.
Okay, but other, I guess, non-important stuff that not related to ADA is being removed.
Yes, the only item, as I just mentioned, that we're removing is, the only reason we're removing it from the referendum is because we're moving ahead with it next summer.
Oh, thank you.
Hi.
Go ahead.
All right, I just wanted to, wanted to thank a few people. So I wanted to thank, look, this was a long process. I want to thank the boards that came before us that scaffolded this board that I think really came together on it. All the experts involved, including people we rely on inside, Dr. Malash, Mrs. Sugars, their teams. This took a lot of effort. This took, we've only just begun. There's a song like that. I'm not going to sing it for you. But it's been quite a process. And I really appreciate, I mean that, I really appreciate the work that people have done to look at this and vision a future for this district, this town, to make it excellent, the way our reputation is and the way that we are. Excellence is happening all the time. This is a commitment we've got to make to the generations to come. This is not a 20-year, this scaffolds the next 50. This is mission critical to Cherry Hill, and people worked extra hours and weekends and went to, back to the drawing board and back to, this is a tremendous amount of effort. Hundreds of people involved. And so, my thanks for really together shepherding this. And really excited to be here today.
I have two things to ask. I know in the past we talked about the grant writings and the naming rights. Are those going to be in the future process? How about getting more funds? Like I know this big amount of bonds that we're putting together. So if we were able to get some funds through the grant writing or naming rights, would then the bond, I don't know, once it passes, that mean the taxing on the community will be less or about the same, or how would that impact?
Yeah, so just from my perspective, Mrs. Tong, it's either your committee or Ms. Stern. So yeah, it's a great topic. And I think one that's very important. Now, normally in our system that goes through BNF, which is also, Mrs. Sugars is going to be in the middle of it either way. But you two are going to have to fight it out. Let us know what you decide. Ms. Fleischer?
Thank you. I do want to thank the administration and everyone involved for all the hours. Getting this together and having the revisions from last week. I wanted to speak specifically and thank you about the difference in the capital reserve fund and how it was raised for the 4 million. I think that makes a lot, it's a lot better for the taxpayer to look at that. And the way it was wonderful, because being a new board member, we have to learn all these things. And we were able, Mrs. Sugars was wonderful this week, giving a little primer of what to do in a budget. So I'm understanding everything now. And not that I didn't before, but I'm understanding every single thing. And I really appreciate it and can also understand what effort it took to figure out what is reasonable, what is great for our town, what is wonderful for the students in our community. So I just wanted to say thank you for being creative and thank you for helping us push this along, because this is definitely something that is historic for our district, and I'm very excited to be a part of it. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Stern?
Well, first of all, I just want to, echo all the thanks and a great sense of relief that this is done to this point. It's a big number, but I think, we asked the administration last week to sharpen their pencils, to really take a closer look, and we got that, and I really appreciate that. There are things in here that I'm really excited about. There are things in here that, maybe at first glance I would have said, not so sure it's my priority, but we came to a great consensus. And I think that's our job, is to work together as a board and do what we can for the kids. And, to know that this has now come to just about $1 a day for the average assessed home, which is, it's hard to buy anything for $1 these days. I think that's pretty great for all the work that's going to be done on 19 schools. That's pretty amazing. So that's just my kudos. And the other thing I want to say is, as part of BNF, now that we're moving, I'm going to be chairing that committee with my fellow committee members and with Mrs. Sugars, we're going to really start looking at what are some of the other ways that we can continue to ensure we're being, good stewards of the taxpayer money while providing, for our top priority, which is the kids. And I'm looking forward to, continuing to explore, different types of alternative funding, whether it's grants, whether it's naming rights, whatever it may be, whatever the board decides makes sense, and in conjunction with the administration. I think continuing to do something that I know Mr. Avade and I have, years ago talked about, which was continuing to ensure that in the operating budget, there's always money for ongoing, maintenance and repairs and replacements, that's just part of good fiscal management of the district. And I really see that happening. I'm just really excited about it. So I'm looking forward to planning, and this is coming to your inbox pretty soon in this next day or so. How do we move forward with this? So thank you.
All right. Student reps, this will be for your children. No, just kidding. Anyone else want to comment on this momentous? Yeah. Sorry, Mrs. Dong?
The last thing I will talk about is the fair funding. I think we should work more on that as community members and board members, to get that fair funding that we should get back over the past whatever years. But I think that's a goal we need to achieve and work more on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, and there is a, fair funding. I mean, I'm looking at the audience. You all know what I would say, but there's a meeting on Thursday. It's a very important effort. It's part of, what I did for several years. Very worthwhile. Great group. And yeah, I do want to know how this board can support that effort more, but more to come on that. Okay, other thoughts on this topic? Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Mosh. Thank you, Mrs. Sugars. Okay, next we are up to the road forward, and I will yield to Dr. Mosh.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia, and thank you for the discussion. Dr. Morton is going to pull up and share his screen. I think, Dr. Morton, you're going to share your screen, or Dr. Mahan's going to share her screen, and we will jump into a road forward presentation and discussion. Again, some important details. This has been probably in some ways one of the more challenging months to discuss the information regarding that impacts the road forward. Working through and with the New Jersey Department of Health and the Camden County Department of Health to ascertain what's intended and what's meant and what actually is included in the updates that come out. There have been a number of updates that have come out from the New Jersey Department of Health since the winter break around the 30th of December, and then up to and including the end of last week is when the most recent updates came out. And again, as they get ready to do it, and I will say this later probably too, but a special thanks to our school nurses. They are truly on the front line of dealing with COVID in so many ways. There are medical professionals, medical experts that work in each one of our schools. We are very fortunate as a school district. We have 22 school nurses that work across our 19 buildings. There are 2 at each of our comprehensive high schools, 1 at every other school. And we have an additional nurse that fills in and acts as support in buildings where she is needed during the course of the day. And I just have to remind the members of the community, when the nurses are in contact with families, the nurses aren't arbitrarily reaching out to you, and they're not trying to be rough. They're not trying to hurt your feelings or upset you. They are literally following the guidelines and the policy of the school district as we take the information and it's adopted for what come through from the medical health experts. Too often, as I've had the opportunity to see many of our nurses in the schools over the last couple of weeks, they are in a lot of ways hearing a lot of grief from a lot of folks. And I just want to thank the nurses and just remind our families, the nurses are the ones there to be your supports, to deliver that information to you, to help you, and just kind of take that into consideration the next time you pick up the phone and you're talking to the school nurse. So Dr. Morton, it looks like you guys are set.
Yes, we are ready. Thank you so much, Dr. Malash. Appreciate it. Thank you for the volume control. All right, so as Dr. Malash mentioned, this has been somewhat of a challenging month for us. We received quite a bit of new information, new recommendations that will undoubtedly have an impact on our entire community. So please pay attention. Joining me tonight will be Ms. Weatherington and Ms. Case Abner, our lead nurse as well. So something that we customarily like to do is we like to begin with the district's commitments. And I think that it's important that I just take just a couple moments to just emphasize the highlighted portion of the district commitments that's on the screen. And that highlighted portion has to do with regularly scheduled school days for all students. From the outset of this year, it has been a focus for the district to ensure that our children have an opportunity to be in school each and every day. As we approached our work with the Road Forward Committee, our primary charge and responsibility was to implement mitigation strategies and implement protocols that would allow students to remain in school every day. You might ask why. As we heard some of the board candidates speak today, if you've paid attention to some of the national dialogue and some of the research, you see that there's tremendous information nationally about the negative impacts that remote learning had on many kids throughout the country, the negative impacts that it had on many kids here. Essentially, it affected our children's mental health. As a result, we've tried to do all we can to offset those negative impacts. Remote learning worked for some, but for far too many, it caused concerns. Next slide. So in the latest COVID-19 activity level index, the calorie report, this is the report we look to as a guide to give us our activity level across the state. We were once again in the red, very high risk category. Because of that, and again, because of our district's commitment to ensure that we have in-person learning moving forward, we did implement more stringent mitigation strategies. You'll see down at the bottom of this chart here, one of the regions, the Southeast region, actually moved to orange, which is a downgrade. Hopefully, as we move forward, we'll be able to move down as well and begin to open things up and provide more of a normalized experience and reduce some of those stringent mitigation strategies. But the target and the focus has been to allow us to maintain in-person learning for our kids. So the Road Forward Committee of the Whole met on January 18th. Excellent conversation, excellent dialogue and conversation. I'll tell you, we typically schedule about an hour. We probably can go 2, 3, or maybe even 4 hours with the discourse and the way that the dialogue takes place. This meeting that we had on January 18th actually focused on the New Jersey Department of Health's updated recommendations that they sent for the schools. They used the CDC's updated recommendations to update their recommendations as well. And this is the guidance that we followed throughout the entire course of the pandemic. So just some of the topics that were discussed, the criteria for close contact, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, quarantine timelines, temporary remote instruction, mask, recommendations while in the very high risk category, and just some quotes from the committee, and something I think that was abundantly clear, and I think a common refrain from the members of the committee, and that was we must follow the science. We need to be able to pivot as a district and adjust to the new recommendations from the NJDOH. Truly, no matter how difficult, that is where our stance has been as a district ongoing. So the updates that we'll go through from here, they apply to grades K through 12. They do not apply to the Barclay Early Childhood Center. All right, things will remain the same at Barclay, but the things that we talk about from here will apply to our schools K through 12. So you may have noticed that at the Road Forward meeting on the 18th, we focused on the updated document that was issued on the 12th. Well, on January 19th, there were new recommendations that were issued as well and additional updates. We will highlight some of the big areas from there. The first one, mask. Masks will need to be continued to be worn while indoors by staff, students, and visitors in all situations except those delineated in the continuity of learning plan. Here's a big one, sports and other activities. When the COVID-19 risk level of community transmission is at the very high risk level or red, it's recommended that schools limit participation in extracurricular activities to those students and staff who are up to date with COVID-19 vaccination per advisory committee immunization practices recommendations. So essentially, there's a differentiation there between those if you're vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Conduct COVID-19 screening testing of students and staff regardless of vaccination status twice weekly for participation in all extracurricular activities. Now we have these starred because we wanted to give families an opportunity to be notified sufficiently. And these two would be implemented starting with the spring sports season. All right, so it's spring sports season scheduled to start in March. Exclusion. So NJDOE recommends that students with the following symptoms be promptly isolated from others and excluded from school. At least 2 of the following symptoms: fever, chills, rigors, muscle aches, headache, sore throat, nausea or vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, congestion, or runny nose, or at least 1 of the following symptoms: cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, new olfactory disorder, or new taste disorder. All right, I'm going to ask Ms. Wethington or Ms. Case Abner to pick it up from here.
So basically, students, regardless of their vaccination status, or anybody who may have the symptoms that Dr. Morton just mentioned. If they're not tested, if we don't have a negative COVID result or an alternative diagnosis from a physician or a licensed healthcare provider, then we expect the students to stay home. Under a certain condition that, as per the health department, the isolation period can be limited to 5 full days after positive COVID test or after symptoms start. So that day of symptoms start or COVID test, whichever came first, is actually day 0. So that would be 5 full days. And then if, under the condition that there's no symptoms or symptoms are resolving, and the student or staff is fever-free without the use of any fever-reducing medicines for 24 hours, they can leave their home and come back with strict mask wearing in place while they're in, where they should mask wear while they're at home or in public, indoors and outdoors, for the additional 5 days that would bring you up to the 10 days. So basically the NJ, DOH, DOE has schools, we need to have a plan in place so that if there's a time period, for instance, lunch, where these students need to take their masks off, we need to have a place for them to be able to do it away from other students. And the time without the mask during this day 6 to 10 needs to be minimized. Also on day 6 to 10, limit participation in extracurricular activities to only those activities where masks can be worn consistently and correctly. Students returning on days 6 to 10, they will eat in a separate space and maintain social distance from other students while eating in compliance with NJDOH guidance. Parents must acknowledge and agree to this requirement in writing prior to the student's return. Students who are not compliant will be returned to virtual instruction until the isolation window has closed. As of February 1st, exposed close contacts who have no COVID compatible symptoms in the following groups will be excluded from school, from in-person school, but not remote. Age 12 or older who've completed the primary series of recommended COVID vaccines, but have not received the recommended booster shot when eligible, which is now 5 months after your second vaccine, and persons who are not fully vaccinated. Also, as of February 1st, exposed close contacts who have no COVID-19 symptoms in the following groups will not be excluded from in-person school. Age 12 or older and have received all recommended vaccine doses, including boosters and additional primary shots for some immune-compromised people. Age 5 to 11 years old who's completed their primary series of COVID vaccines or have had confirmed COVID-19 within the last 90 days, tested positive using a viral test that's on file in school with your nurse.
So Mrs. Case Abner just reviewed the recommendations from the New Jersey Department of Health. Our administrative team has been meeting and synthesizing and discussing and assessing these recommendations, and we do not intend to implement the booster requirements. We do not believe that we're going to have the ability to track the boosters for students and for staff. We don't believe we'll have staffing capacity in any given building if we are also going to require boosters. The governor's executive order requiring COVID vaccination does not require boosters. It requires 2 doses. And the CDC definition and the NJDOH definition of fully vaccinated continues to be 2 doses of a vaccine. So for those reasons, we're not going to move forward with the booster portion of the recommendations. And then I will talk about testing. So because the district has opted into the state testing program, we have some additional requirements. So you may have heard other districts who are not doing some of the things that we're talking about. A district was not obligated to opt into the state testing program, but if you opt into it, then there are things that we as a district have to do because of that obligation. So we will be testing students in 2 different categories. We'll have open testing for any parent who's interested with their consent. And then as Dr. Morton mentioned earlier, testing of athletes and students participating in really high risk, I think is the language, extracurricular activities. While we're in red, that would have to occur twice a week. If we move to orange, that would occur 1 time a week. And then Dr. Morton also provided just some information for the vaccination criteria, which we talked about earlier. You would need 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna or a single dose of J&J in order to help parents get their children vaccinated and boosted. We're having 2 clinics, one at Rosa and one here at the Malberg building, February 9th at Rosa and February 10th here at Malberg.
Thank you, Ms. Weatherington and Ms. Case Abner. So just to, as we begin to sum up, during our committee meeting, you know, like I said, there's a back and forth dialogue and exchange. I think for me, it's very important that we have individuals who can present information and can present ideas from different perspectives. We want to evaluate all options. We want to evaluate every angle. For me, no question is off limits. I think, you know, we've tried to take this approach where it's open dialogue and exchange. And just to give you just an idea of some of the questions that typically come up and that came up during the last meeting, when will students be able to attend games again? Was a discussion. When will the upcoming scheduled band, orchestra, choral performances be live or virtual? What will theater performances look like? These were referencing the stringent mitigation strategies. What are the testing protocols? Who has access and who should test? Can we differentiate between levels as it relates to in-person versus remote learning? How will we move forward in an environment where COVID is endemic? It's becoming the norm. How might we adapt our strategies to allow for the continuation of in-person activities and schooling? But that's the dialogue. And I think one of the requests from the committee as well was just to allow the public and allow everyone to understand that's the way that dialogue takes place. So as I mentioned previously, our meetings are scheduled for an hour. We can extend those meetings probably 2 to 3 hours and still have plenty to discuss. Just a couple final notes. It's really been our desire to try to provide as normalized of an experience as possible. Prior to the Cali score moving to red, we've been allowing for social events, trips. We've been allowing for, you know, things to try to take place as normal as possible. We are hoping that we move out of the red, that hopefully some of the mitigation strategies have had maybe just a small impact, and we'll be able to resume with things as expected and as normal as possible. There's a school who has, for instance, a theater performance just this weekend. When the new report comes out Thursday, fingers crossed, we'll be orange and we'll see a normal audience attend that event. The same thing goes for the basketball game over at East. You know, the East basketball team is doing fantastic this year, and we received requests to try to give the kids the support of a full house. We desire that, you know, and Dr. Malash desires that. I desire that, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to provide that. So with that, I'll end and turn it over for any questions.
Mrs. Arroyo, did you want to get us started? See if there are board member questions. This is falling in CNI. No, if you have, or if you want to just field anything on the board side.
Does anyone have any questions? Fletcher?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Morton, Dr. Mahan, and Ms. Case Avner. Sitting on the committee, I can attest it was a very interesting, very enlightening, and the fact that a lot of things have changed even since we did that is amazing. So I had a question on the testing, specifically the extracurricular and the sports, because that looks like it's going to be the most intensive into, besides the whole thing about the 5 days that they're letting kids back, this testing protocol that it's showing. We're hoping that the red will go down, but there's a good possibility orange will stay around. And we're talking about, like, I wanted to say, are we talking about all the different levels, elementary, middle, and high school for extracurricular activities, and also things like proms and different end of the year things? I'm hoping we're not going to be at orange, but if we are, does it, encompass all of that? Thank you, Mrs. Whittington.
Sure, that's fine. So things are changing at a rapid pace. Just this month, we've received updates January 6th, 10th, 12th, 14th, and 19th. So every time we get an update, we assess, can we implement, and then we have a new one. So it really is very difficult to maintain at this kind of pace. So we are currently in red. In red, we would be obligated to test students regardless of their vaccination status. They would be participating in high-risk sports or high-risk extracurriculars. Now that's defined for us. So high-risk sports would be ones that have close sustained contact between participants, and high-risk extracurriculars are ones where there's increased exhalation occurs, such as activities that involve singing, shouting, band, or exercise, especially when conducted indoors without a mask. So we are already working on this. We have been in contact with buildings. Dr. Mahan, Dr. Morton and I have a letter that we are jointly signing to send out to families shortly so that parents can start to make plans. If we move to orange, we would only be testing unvaccinated students, still in the same categories, high-risk sports and extracurriculars, but that would be the difference, once a week, only unvaccinated.
Thank you very
Did I
much.
answer all your questions?
You definitely did,
great.
and even more than I thought, so I appreciate that. The last question I had, well, I guess the last question I had, which I didn't ask, is do we have enough tests for this, or are we still waiting for them to come in?
So our testing company, Mrs. Adrian and I work with the testing company, and we're in regular contact with them. They feel confident that they'll have sufficient tests.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
First, I want to echo, well, thank you for the presentation. I want to echo Dr. Malash's thank you to the nurses, because I think the other thing we have to remember is that they have their full-time job of injuries and illness, and what can probably also be a full-time job with the COVID. So just thank you, Ms. Case Abner, and to all the school nurses. You all need to be recognized, so thank you. I have one question. I apologize if you just answered it because it's a little hard to hear. With the testing, right? So you have the athletes who would be testing, and then there was the second category, which were students if parents wanted their child to be tested. Is that a random testing, or that is a parent is like, oh, would you test? I'm just trying to figure out how that group of students is selected to be tested.
So parents would opt into that. There would be no requirement, but if I, for example, wanted to get my children tested, we would have a certain day and time where parents could come in and do that.
Okay, so it's basically the parent elects it today. I want
Yes.
my child. It's not like you're just going to be like, oh, hey, we're 20, we have these consents and we're going to
Right.
randomly
No.
test.
Mm.
So it's with the parent coming through. Thank you.
Yes. And then I don't know if we mentioned that the student testing program, we are going to launch at the start of the spring season to give
Yes.
parents the opportunity to either plan to have their children vaccinated, and if that's not their option, to plan for testing.
Thanks. So yeah, wow, a lot since our meeting, which was what, a week ago. So I just want to say that one of the things that's come up quite a bit, and it's something that, I think still needs a little more, I guess I'd like a little more under clarity. When we're talking about activities, and we're talking about, sports, yes, we are limiting the spectators, but there are still spectators allowed at our I know at the high school level sports. I don't know about
Yes.
the middle school.
Yes.
So, and we're in the red, and those activities are happening with kids without masks on, right? Sometimes, some of the sports, I know, some of the
Yes.
sports activities are. So if we're looking at, making sure that, all of our students are participating, whether it's athletics or other extracurriculars, why would that be different? And that's what I'm trying to understand. Let's say with, a performance that's going on, why wouldn't we perhaps limit the audience rather than, and you, not that you said
Mhm.
that there would be no live audience, but I was kind of hearing a little bit between the lines. So could you clarify that? And then just, how you envision that if unfortunately, if we were to still find ourselves in red, let's say, and because I know there's a performance, I think tomorrow night, there's a performance
Yes.
this weekend, so.
Yeah, so what we've done with performances, vocal, choral, band, theater type performances is to follow the same protocol that we follow for athletics, and that is to limit the spectators to just those who are friends or family members. So each participant can have 2 spectators attend. Again, it's just to try to maximize space. To have as much airflow and ventilation and things as possible in those spaces.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that, the district is really looking to that. And I think that's, truly an equity issue. I think I'm relieved to hear that we're not,
Absolutely.
we're, not disallowing in person. So I do hope we go to Orange because I'm hoping to go to the show this weekend. So.
Yes, fingers crossed.
And I don't have a family member in the show. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Okay, I want to make a comment or question based, as a parent who's been living through this for 2 years and who's exhausted looking at what the daily recommendations are. And who doesn't want to check the stupid CDC anymore or the New Jersey site. I just want a quick answer. When I go, so I just went to the Cherry Hill Public School homepage, and it's kind of tough to figure out exactly what I'm supposed to do if I have COVID or if I was exposed to somebody with COVID. And I think that it would, let's hope that we're going to be red to orange to yellow in no time at all. But that's going to mean a lot of change in terms of what the school district has to do in terms of different state requirements and whatever. Is it possible to come up with a better way of communicating to the community in a simple flow chart what they should do on that day? They can just look at it and, oh, I have COVID. What should I do? What test should I take? How long do I need to wait? And maybe there is something like that, but I think just like a nice old fashioned flow chart of do this, do that would be amazing to help parents navigate this, because I think we're all just tired and trying to we want to do the right thing, but that's my comment. We're tired. Help us make it easy.
So Dr. Root, I think the easiest answer is if you think you have COVID, stay home. If you have any symptoms, stay home, call the nurse. The nurse will give you the best, most accurate guidance. Only the nurse. Don't call the administration. They are great at what they do. They are not the health professionals in the building. That would be the school nurse. So call the nurse, but stay home. Please stay home for everyone's safety. And then about a flow chart, we had some conversations, Mrs. Wilson and Dr. Malash and I think we are putting a graphic together. I don't have an ETA on that. We can certainly provide you an update.
Just a quick follow-up to Dr. Root. I really appreciate what you said, because I think this is something we've been talking about is overall communication and communication with families. And I think, I think a clear-cut guidance, if you're sick, stay home is, that's pretty understandable. I think it's pretty universal at this point. People know that. But there's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of if-thens. And I think as a family that has gone through this myself, I found it hard to navigate, to be very honest with you. I went on the website. I mean, I know where to look, or I should know where to look. And even looking, there was some debate and in my house, like, well, wait, are we, wait, this family member, this family member, I just I think if we're asking people to follow the guidance and to be clear, we got to make it really clear. And the nurses are very overwhelmed. It's very hard to reach a nurse because they're busy and they're answering, they're trying to answer a million phone calls, deal with a million students and emails. So I think just clear cut guidance published on the front page of the website is where I keep always hoping it'll be. So, I just, or wherever the communication can be very clear to the community.
I do just want to comment on the calling the nurses piece. We are never too busy to answer COVID questions. We are busy, but we're not overwhelmed to that point. Honestly, we would rather you call us than try to decipher something and get it wrong. And also, when we're giving you the guidance, it's specific to your child's symptoms start, your child's test date, and we tailor it right to you. So please don't feel like you can't contact the nurse. She may not pick up the phone that second, but you can shoot an email, leave a message. The turnaround time's amazing. They are on it, and they rather have you call them than look on some website and then misinterpret it and then send your child back to school too early. Then they're sitting in class and they tell their teacher and their friends, and it comes back to us, then we're calling you and excluding your child. So please just contact the nurse. That's your best source of information. She's your expert.
Thank you. Ariana?
I just had a question on, I know you mentioned if you're not symptomatic after 5 days of quarantine, you can technically come back to school and stay masked strictly. As to the part where students have to go to like a secluded area, I guess, to have lunch, who would be enforcing that? And if that happens, like to be the student's responsibility to say, I have to go somewhere else. If they don't, what would happen, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so that is a responsibility that each principal and the administrative teams at the school have a responsibility for. Each of the building principals have submitted plans on how they will move forward in handling the identification of students, monitoring of students, follow up with students as well. I would suggest that you have a conversation with Dr. Perry, and he can fill you in on what East plans to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, Corinne. I'm sorry, Corinne, I didn't see your hand up.
It's okay, no problem. Ariana actually took one of my questions anyway, so thank you for that. But in terms of the flow chart, I believe we had something like that in one of these road forward presentations. That was a really good graphic that maybe we can just update it. Because I know I took it back to my own organization and was like, make me one of these. So I know that was really useful. So perhaps we can just update that and use that and get it visible. And then in terms of back to what Ariana was speaking about the isolation of lunchtime, I know we're overwhelmed right now with enough staff to man these cafeterias. Are we prepared to now have another separate space and then have dedicated staff to be watching that space? Or am I not visioning what is possibly going to happen? Like, is it just a section of the cafeteria, or is it a total removed room?
That is a great question. I think it's stretching the capacity of the schools. It's stretching the capacity of the administrators are responsible for it. That's sort of the reason why they had to submit plans tailored to their specific buildings infrastructure, their staffing allocation, and things along those lines. They are great. So they've been able to figure out creative ways to try to make it doable, but it is a challenge. So can't emphasize enough, it is a challenge.
Yeah, I just know, to Ariana's point, it's going to be a little bit on the community, the school community, to be responsible in this too, for it to work, especially at the high school level. Students are going to have to be transparent and understand that the first goal is safety. So I think for what we've already heard is if you're sick, stay home. If you think you're sick, stay home. If you think might be sick, stay home. But I think we're gonna have to ask our students and young people, and perhaps our 2 student reps can be the people that go back and carry the message of, we need our students to be transparent and be clear about what they've had or been exposed to, so that the rest of the community can stay safe as well.
Yeah, and just one other comment along those lines. So the expectation is if students aren't compliant, then they'll have to revert back to virtual instruction throughout the duration of days 6 through 10. That was one of the things that Ms. Case Avenue did go through.
And I think my only last thought is, this was obviously going to apply to staff as well too, correct? Or
Yes.
for these guidelines. So I think that's another place from HR committee standpoint of, we're going to need some subs and some folks to be here, because if teachers are going out like that in the next couple of weeks, we don't have enough subs to go around at this point. So we just need to be pushing that. We need help. The school district needs some more bodies on board. So thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Ben.
All right, it is now time for correspondence. Would anyone on, I think that's right. Would anyone on the board like to share correspondence, since last we were together sharing correspondence? All right. You will notice that we have student representatives sitting at the table. And we will now turn to, oh, there was a question about, who did we go to last time? Sam Size, the floor is yours.
All right. We'll start off with some school news for West. So last week, the Principals Advisory Committee met, and we sort of came to a consensus that one thing that's been an issue at the school is morale and spirit. So we're going to be holding a number of brain break activities to promote our clubs, athletics, and courses. They're just going to be short breaks held school-wide during the day, 10 to 15 minutes long. And they're going to be either in person, live streamed, or pre-recorded, just to give kids a break and be able to see the opportunities that we have at West. Moving on to some activities news. Next week on Monday, we will be having our virtual 8th grade visitation. Families should receive a Google Meet link for athletics, clubs, academic departments, and electives. Schedule will be sent home, and all these families will have the ability to join any meet based on their interests and any questions they have for those specific scheduled times. We plan to send all this information out by the end of this week so that our 8th grade families can join us virtually next week on Monday. And then also, National Honor Society is planning to induct its newest members this Thursday, but because of the current red zone status, it'll be a virtual ceremony for all the students to celebrate their devotion to the pillars of the National Honor Society, which are knowledge, scholarship, service, leadership, and character. Moving on to some department news for our performing arts department. Our vocal music department is working towards Broadway night, and this year the theme will be Broadway on the Beach. As for our theater department, Cinderella will be opening Friday this week. We are planning for both in-person and virtual performances on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And as for our instrumental music department, the West Pitt Orchestra will be performing alongside the theater department in Cinderella for the first time since Chicago, which was in the spring of 2019. Moving on to athletics, the winter sports season is still going strong. However, spring sports registration is officially open now. Spring sports bring a great amount of opportunities to student athletes to get outside and compete in what hopefully will be warm weather. And as for Air Force Junior ROTC, as the second marking period comes to the end, the promotion board will start convening to see which cadets have earned themselves a promotion. In addition to that, the military ball committee has been working hard with Pennsauken High School the plan to now March 11th Military Bowl. Rumor has it that the Grog Bowl this year will be a toilet bowl as per military tradition. This is just one of the many fun opportunities that cadets can experience throughout the academic year. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will turn to Ariana Santiago Ramos for East.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone has had a nice month so far. So the month of January has run pretty smoothly for East, I'm pretty sure. The end of the marking period is coming soon, January 31st, and that marks the end of this first semester as well. Students will be able to see their course selections, see the classes as teachers recommended for them early February, and they will be able to start their course selection early February as well. As for some events, our open house will be Thursday, the 27th. It will be virtual. There's going to be videos from administrators such as Dr. Perry, and there's going to be an opportunity for middle schoolers and their parents to attend breakout rooms for English and different departments like that, as well as clubs and activities so they can interact with our teachers and interact with some students as well. All of our clubs and activities have started back up from winter break and are working very hard this year. Our culture clubs have started practicing for a multicultural day. Both their dancers and their booth, such as Vietnamese Culture Club and Indian Cultural Society, which have practices at least twice a week. As part of our MCD countdown as well, each club gets to showcase their culture in the morning announcements. And this week's spotlight is on Chinese Students Association, who emphasized the vast ethnic diversity in China this morning with 52 ethnic groups in China. Also, clubs like African American Culture Club and Latinos and Amigos are preparing to celebrate Black History Month, which starts February 1st. One of our clubs right now, Random Acts of Kindness, is holding their winter drive, and Thespian Society has also started to work on their new play, which is going to be Putnam County's Spelling Bee. Grade level activities are also running smoothly with a successful Krispy Kreme fundraiser by the class of 2025 and our upcoming ice skating night for the senior class. All proceeds from the skate night and the tickets and everything that happens there will go to the Robbie Bloom Scholarship. So if you're a senior, I definitely recommend going. As for sports, the boys basketball is currently on a winning streak. They won pretty much all of their games right now against Overbrook, Shawnee, and lots of others. The girls basketball has a game tomorrow, and they won their game yesterday. And boys and girls golf is starting, and East Girls Swim coach Ms. Bowser just celebrated her 202 victories around a week ago, which we are very proud of. Lastly, our East Side newspaper, as you can see, published an article last week talking about student perspective on the school environment, which included topics such as homophobia and racism, anti-Semitism, and sexism. This article has generated lots of productive conversation between both students and staff. And I'm personally really happy to see so many people passionate about working towards creating a more inclusive environment in our school, and not only seeing students so passionate about it, but seeing teachers and our administration also working towards that goal. And we are very excited to see what the next marking period brings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, student reps. All right. Well, the show has just begun. We are now off to first public comment. Let me read to you what it tells me to read to you about acting as civil models of decorum. Cherry Hill is a community that values education. Issues that affect our children, schools, and community bring out strong emotions in all of us. The Board of Education takes seriously its vision to work with civility. Please join the board in sending a message to our students that even the most difficult issues can be addressed while showing respect for one another. And as is our custom, we'll start in the room. I think that's our custom. Well, if not, we'll start that custom tonight. Start within the room. If anyone would like to come down, I have to figure out how to. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. In this first section, these are the action agenda items only. Please reference which action agenda item you will be speaking about, and comments are limited to 3 minutes.
Mr. Avadia, is the bond an action item tonight?
Yes, the projects are. Yep.
Hello, everyone. Rick Short, 1002 Chilton Parkway. I want to congratulate Ms. Sugars for actually lowering the cost. I know Sam Walmart would be very happy because Sam used to understand the principles of being under a whole number. So I congratulate you. I also congratulate you, Ms. Sugars, for removing the light bright signs, because that's just one thing that would make somebody not vote. And we all know Mr. Bob Garrison would say, don't give people reasons to vote no. Now, the question is, I believe Mr. Garrison made an oversight of $1 million. I think this $1 million oversight will be a plague on the bond. We are moving in a good direction, but this plague would move in a bad direction. Because what happens is people start saying things like corruption. I would never say this board's corrupt unless I had 100% proof. I wouldn't come to this mic and say that unless I had 100% proof. But to allow $1 million floating around in the air when I can mathematically prove it, and I've submitted it to the board, it is an issue. And it will be a plague on the bond. I don't want to see the bond dead. I want to see the bond, yes. I want to support the bond. You know, at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about the community. So I've come up here before and said the price is insane. And I promise to never come up to this board, and I'll try not to ever to type that it's insane. If the bond fails, it'll fail because it was too high. But that was my opinion. So it is what it is. And I want to also congratulate Ms. Stern for maybe having a good cue. $1 a day. Can you afford $1 a day for your school to improve? Sounds like a pretty good marketing ploy. But I'm telling you right now, and I hope I work with the board to lower it at least $1 million, because there is undisputable proof that Mr. Garrison made an oversight. It can be mathematically proved, and it's not right. $1 million in a bond, it needs to be lowered $1 million. Thank you. And I'll be back again and again with the same question, and that's not good because it's $1 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to the line for Dr. Podowitz.
Well, hi, my name is Jeff Podowitz, and I live in Cherry Hill. 18.1, resolution of the Board of Education to present the project to voters via bond referendum at a special school district election to be tentatively held on September 27, 2002. A special school district election whose parameters will be determined by the school board and administrators, and we will pay for. At the very least, with a project proposal of this magnitude of cost, voters in Cherry Hill should be able to have their say on Election Day, November 2022, where there will be increased access to voting and more will vote. The last bond, I stood in front of the school board and pleaded for an increase in the 4 hours of voting time that was being allotted to us, even 1 hour more. I was basically told that 4 hours, the minimum allowable time, was legally okay, and that minimum allowable time to vote was what the school board and administration was determined to give us and did for a bond whose principal was a significant $210 million. The school board and administration also did its best to control all narratives and information available. Please let us, the voters, have our say on Election Day, November 2022. Please change the date on 18.1 to the Election Day, November 2022. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. Is anyone from the audience making their way out? Okay.
Hello again. Matthew Bryn, 1924 Pippin Circle. So we spent some time most recently discussing the updated guidance to prevent the spread of COVID and how long people need to quarantine at home, 5 days. Is the board considering the recent law that passed in New Jersey that allows retired teachers to return to work and still collect their pension?
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Mr. Britt, it's not an agenda item, so you can wait for a second public comment.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
No, not a problem.
It's okay. All right, we're going to go to the line. Again, if you could just state the agenda item you're speaking of, and it looks like Andy McIlvaine is next.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Andy McIlvaine, Cherry Hill. Item 18.1. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. As many of you know, based on some of the things I've said, this is my 5th time around through the bond referendum process, once as a board member, twice as a business administrator, and then this is the second one as a senior citizen. I just want to compliment the board for the amount of work that has gone in, that this is the best process, excuse me, that I have ever seen. And I appreciate it greatly. I appreciate the fact that you have taken, Mrs. Sugars especially, and the members of the staff have taken their pencils, sharpened them up, and reduced the principal amount to what is still a large number. But I think, again, through the process, the need and what the impact will be to the community of going forward with this bond should be obvious to all. Again, for those of you who know me and maybe a little bit tired of my grumpy old man act, I just want to thank again the board for and compliment you for so many young people. You have taken a very, very wise action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the line is Laura Einhorn, Ann Einhorn.
Hi, Ann Einhorn, Cherry Hill. So I would like to thank Mrs. Sugars and her team. You've done a marvelous job of reducing the cost on the bond. I can assure you that I'll do everything in my power to help our community pass this bond. It's not just the future of the students that I am concerned about and our staff, but also about the values of our homes in Cherry Hill. I do appreciate I can keep my husband's hands off the thermostat. That will only tentatively right now cost me $1 a day. I would like the board to note as you move forward, though, that I am pleased that you're using capital reserve, but that as you move forward in the budget process, that we see our way to going to the 2% cap so that in the future, we can build the reserve in order to complete other projects that may have been removed at this current time. I thank you all very much. The really hard work has yet to come, but I think that we can do it as a community, and I would like to see us do it as a community. And I sincerely hope that all 8 board members will be able to vote yes with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the line, we have Mona Noyes.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Mona Noyes. I'm a resident of Cherry Hill, obviously. I want to thank the board, but most particularly the administration and all the people who worked very hard on this bond. I think it's a marvelous compromise in all kinds of ways. And I think that it's important for Cherry Hill to begin to understand that as much as we talk about how much we value our children, they deserve to live in buildings that honor the kind of students and also the staff, the people who work in them. I was on the board long ago, and I was one of the people who always deferred to program, as was Andy McIlvain and so many people for so long. We can't do that anymore, but this is reasonable. And I think that we need to ask our community to think about this in terms of values. If we really value our children, what is more important than the kind of places where we educate them and where they learn to be the kind of people who will take care of all of us in the future? They're critically important, and they deserve to have upgraded, decent, wrong word, decent, improved kinds of places to do their learning. So I want to thank you all. I hear support from the board. I'm thrilled about that. And I intend to talk to everybody I know who are lots of older people who I want to assure you worry and care about Cherry Hill and education. So we'll be doing what we can. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next is M.
Hi, it's Mindy Rosen, Cherry Hill. So about the Capital Reserve Fund, in a letter that I received from Office of Civil Rights dated August 8, 2021, they said that they reviewed the district's website that provides a prioritized summary of accessibility improvement recommendations and the facilities referendum ad hoc committee strategy and timeline, and it incorporates backup funding plans. So are these backup funding plans that OCR is talking about for use for ADA compliance in the case that the bond fails from these capital reserve funds that we are now thinking of using? So that's my one question. I'm so excited that Dr. Malash said that we will never use the term grandfathered in again. I'm so glad to finally hear you say this, because for way too many years, you have told me that and other advocates about how the district is grandfathered in concerning ADA. So I'm so glad that's not in the district vocabulary anymore. And the 6th grade is not part of this right now, right? Have to call back to talk about 6th grade center. Hello?
No, so that will wait till second public comment.
Okay, thanks so much then.
Thank you. Trying to decipher, it seemed like there's an ardent yes and then like a couple no. I was like, I don't, maybe. Thank you all so much. That wraps up that part, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Malash for superintendent comments.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia, and I will be brief. Just again, want to thank the folks that delivered the presentations tonight. I appreciate the comments from the public and from the board. And thank you, Mrs. Sugars and her team for the work that was done preparing the information about the referendum and about the projects to submit. Let me just remind everybody as we go through, there is not yet a referendum, right? There are proposed projects to be included in a referendum. There is not a referendum yet, right? There is not a referendum that will be determined once the project applications come back in the spring, and ultimately will be decided later on in the spring. But at this point, there is not a referendum. But thank you to Mrs. Sugars and her team for all the work that they've done ostensibly and almost always behind the scenes with what's being done, including Don Bart, who is an integral member of the team and what goes on in many of the different roles that he serves. To Dr. Morton and Mrs. Wethington and Mrs. Case Abner, who were with us this evening to present about the Road Forward Committee. As we talked about, I mentioned it, and Dr. Morton mentioned it, this past month in dealing with the changes in the information and adjusting and adapting and planning, taking everybody into consideration, all of our students and all of our staff members, and what it means to be safe and what's the environment that we can provide has been incredibly challenging. We have many members of our Road Forward Committee who all donate and dedicate their time. There's board members, there are parents and family members, there are staff members, and they come together. And as Dr. Morton said, they have very honest and open dialogue and passionate dialogue. You know, one of the things that we deal with, and one of the board candidates said it this evening, you know, is that when we are talking about our children and their health and safety, it's an emotional topic for everybody, and everybody wants the best. And it's trying to figure out what is the best, you know, that we are all trying to do together. So I'm grateful for all of the folks that are involved and everybody that's been sharing ideas and their thoughts and their perspective. Thank you to everyone that participated in the various Martin Luther King Day of Service activities that took place last week. I'm thrilled to read about and to see images of some of the things that our students and our staff members and our community members participated in. One of the ones that I do want to highlight, Mrs. Wilson and I had the opportunity to go over to Cooper Elementary School to film our quick minute. And Cooper Elementary, the PTA there, had started with the students a project putting together personal care bags for folks, Cherry Hill, Camden County, and in the South Jersey area. They talked about it at the zone PTA, and it kind of branched out into other PTAs. As of earlier today, I heard from Mrs. Hung, who is the chair of our zone PTA group. They said they are still counting the packages, and they were over 1,500 earlier today. So a tremendous thank you to everybody that was involved in that. I know the two fifth graders that I spoke to, you know, that Friday midday over at Cooper, were thrilled to have been a part of it. You know, and just to see something that everybody or so many people contributed, something small, but it's going to reach so many different lives right here in South Jersey. So thank you to everybody that participated in that project. We can all make a difference, individual voices coming together to do something that is significant and that is important. Also want to thank the candidates that submitted their names to be considered to fill the 9th seat on the Board of Education. We will post tomorrow, we'll release that information about the people that did submit their names. I can tell you that there were 15 people that submitted a letter and a resume, 15 people that were reviewed and considered by the board for inclusion in the interviews and the process. And tonight we had 4 people that interviewed for the position. So thank you to all 15 of them who submitted their names and were interested in participating in this incredible volunteer opportunity. Probably one of the most difficult volunteer experiences any of you will ever have. Ariana mentioned that the semester ends next week. January 31st is the end of the first half of the year. This year is half over, which is incredible, right? The speed just continues to pick up, and it will do that throughout the course of the spring. One of the things I always try to remind our students when I meet with them and our staff, when I write to them or when I talk with families, is to take time just to catch your breath, right? To step back and to be reflective when you have the opportunity to do that. Everybody's working incredibly hard. It's different. It's a new experience for all of our students. I often say that each of our kids typically gets one experience in 3rd grade and one experience in 9th grade or in 12th grade. And it's different for all of them because of what the experiences are that they've had during the course of the last couple of years. We all need that opportunity to step back and to reflect, to catch our breath, and to look around us, right? Please remember that you're continuing to stay in touch with the school, contact your children's teachers, be involved, see the events, and be out there. Reminder to everyone that next Tuesday, February 1st, is an in-service day. Our staff members will be in school. There's professional development that's going on across the district, some really exciting opportunities for our staff members, but our students are off that day. February 1st coincides with Lunar New Year. This was a discussion that took place beginning in committee meetings and in the community a number of years ago, came up through the P&L committee. This is the first year where Lunar New Year has fallen during the course of the week, and that's why we are having in-service day next Tuesday. So just a reminder, don't drop your kids off at school on February 1st. We are not expecting them that day. So thank you, Mr. Vadia, back to you.
Thank you. I am on a path of continuous improvement, and I did this wrong last time. So here's what I'm going to say. Action consent motion to approve items number 14 to 18. Now, before I move to do that, are there any comments or questions from board members about any of the items on our consent agenda this evening? Oh gosh, you know, you try to, okay. Okay, we've got this action consent agenda. Can I have, okay, I'm going to move that we rock and roll on it. Do I have a second rocker? Mrs. Arroyo. Okay, now before we go any further, are there any board members with questions or comments about any of the contents of this consent agenda? All right, I will do better. Mrs. Sugars, can you start the voting, please?
All right, so I'm going to open up the online voting. And if there are any abstentions, you can let me know that information now. Ms. Friedel.
Ms. Sugars, I need to abstain from 15.1 as I was not at the meeting.
Okay. Ms. Tong.
I have to abstain from 17.1.
Are there any others? Ms. Stern.
Trying to find it, Mrs. Sugars, which I don't remember. I'm sorry. I have from the, we talked about an exact, in 17.1, I have to abstain from 224042 to avoid a conflict of interest, please.
Okay.
And also, Mrs. Sugars, in 17.1, I have to abstain on the same 22.4.042. For the same reason.
Okay. Dr. Root here, I have to abstain from the minutes 15.1 and 15.2 as I was not there.
Actually, I also need to abstain. I didn't realize that on 15.1 and 15.2 because I was not there. Thank you.
Mrs. Glacier, have you cast your vote?
Okay, very good. So we have a unanimous yes vote, except for the exceptions noted on the abstentions.
Awesome, thank you. Any board members with new business? Any board members with old business? Okay. We are going to move to our second public comment. This is for any topic. Please state your name and municipality. 3 minutes. There is a system behind us to capture this 3-minute time allotment. And we'll start in the room. Yes.
Good evening, Carolina Bevid, Cherry Hill. Please keep in mind as I make my comment that Pennsylvania and New York Supreme Courts have invalidated their governor's mask mandates, and England is ending all COVID restrictions this week as New Jersey continues to implement strict measures. The rally cry for the last 2 years has been follow the science. We heard Dr. Morton say it in his presentation. Well, the facts that have been obvious to many for a while have finally been confirmed by the CDC. 1, cloth and surgical masks don't work. And 2, COVID is not a serious threat to children, the vaccinated, or the previously infected. So as our district's leaders, why aren't you demanding a rationale from the governor about his scientifically and educationally unsound mask mandate? Governor Murphy does not have expertise in education or science, yet you all, many of you literal doctors of education and science, are sitting idly by as he dictates mandates to school. As an educator myself, I know most of you know that masks cause harm to developing minds and especially to vulnerable learners. As an ESL teacher and special ed teacher myself, my heart is broken for all the English language learners and special needs students whose educations have been unfairly hindered by masks, perhaps never to recover. In the words of writer and commentator Barry Weiss, a catastrophic moral crime is being committed against children. They're being held hostage by the paranoia of adults. Any critical thinker can understand that the intermittent masking done at school is nonsensical to begin with. Yet we continue to submit to the governor's mandate, even after we have unequivocal confirmation from the CDC that non-N95 masks are simply a signal, not an intervention. Sadly, the signal our kids are getting is that their well-being doesn't matter. Please don't misinterpret my comment as a call for children to wear N95 masks at school. Quite the opposite. This district needs to stop viewing children as vectors of disease and start advocating for what is in the best interest of healthy childhood development, removing masks. Mr. Ovadia, if I'm not mistaken, you work for the Salvation Army. Their slogan is doing the most good. In your role as president of the board, I urge you to do the most good by leading our district and inspiring other districts to fight back against Governor Murphy's illogical mask mandate. Thanks.
Thank you. On the line, we have Kristen Viglietta. Ms. Viglietta, you are on mute.
I'm sorry about that. After reading through the thought exchange thoughts, the community voice about how to proceed with middle level redistricting is clear. No sixth grade center, allow students to finish middle school where they began. Each of you was sent an email earlier today with the results from a petition that Beth Becker and I put together. The petition clearly advocates for 3 6th through 8th grade buildings and allowing kids to finish middle school where they began. We've collected 838 signatures thus far, and you'll each be updated as more milestones are hit. Each signature on this petition is important, and each signature was signed by people acting as individuals. But it is worth noting, we have signatures from former board members, the most recent former board president, middle school teachers, current members of the zone exec board, current and past PTA presidents, and current CHSEPTA exec board members. These are people who have dedicated hours and months and years of service to this district and are very much aware of what anything other than 3 6th through 8th grade buildings and allowing kids to finish middle school where they start means. Mrs. Wethington and members of the district committee presented at the December zone PTA meeting. I asked the following at that meeting. I'm a person who looks for data when making decisions. Show me the appropriate data and I'll get on board with a well-supported option. Has the district found any data saying that a 6th grade center in a district of our size, where kids are brought together for 1 year and then dispersed for the remainder of middle school years, is a best practice or is even educationally appropriate? The answer given to the zone table was that the district asked this to the folks who do research for Cherry Hill, and they could find no data. Couple the aforementioned with the fact that not allowing kids to finish school in the buildings they began, even pre-pandemic, is an unnecessary transition at best. This particular subset of children continue to go through a mental health crisis that recently the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, and our own district administrators have acknowledged that this generation of kids is working through. Respectfully, why in the world would you ever even consider uprooting the current 5th and 6th graders and not let them finish middle school where they began? Please do what's right for these kids, do what's right for this district. 3 6 through 8 buildings, allow kids to finish middle school where they began. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn it to the audience.
Try this one more time. Matt Bryn, 1924 Pippin Circle. To address teacher shortages due to COVID absences, is the board considering the recent law that passed in New Jersey that allows retired teachers to return to work and still collect their pension while taking a salary? If yes, what will the outreach efforts be to attract these retired teachers, and how will the district determine the salaries? Question 2, what steps is the board taking to implement the recently passed AAPI curriculum bill? Also want to give a shout out and kudos to Dr. Malosh for advocating publicly for this bill. Thank you for that. And then, has the board considered federal American Rescue Plan funds to offset the cost of the bond, particularly when it comes to HVAC and water infrastructure improvements? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn it to the line for Dr. Kotowitz.
Hi, Okay, hi, Jeff Podowitz and Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I guess I'm for the three, just a comment, I guess I'm for the three middle schools. I would like, personally, I would like the IB program to continue. I like that idea. I know I'm quite good with people who love IB program at the high school level, not in Cherry Hill, but it seemed to be very successful. And at the very least, I think that you would want the three middle schools perspective. I think that you need committee meetings because you gavelled everything pretty quickly. I was hoping there was some discussion. I was hoping that you would change your mind about the date, but you didn't, and that concerns me. There's a very good article from that you could read. It's from NJ Spotlight, dated April 22nd, 2019. Carlino Day wrote it, and it's entitled "Some NJ Districts Pile Up Debt Building Schools, Others Are Debt Free," and there are a lot of links to go to. And it's really would be interesting just for people to read it. Board members, you could read it because the links are pretty good and still available. It talks about SBA districts. It talks about the one in Perth Amboy that is was estimated at the time 210 and 230 million, maybe a little bit more now. It's a 3-story building and is to provide 576,000 square feet for about 2,800 students. You want to read it because Ms. Wilson is mentioned in the article. In fact, Cherry Hill is mentioned in the article. You can read the comments. You won't see any comments from me there, but it's something to read. I can't see the time, so I don't really know how much time I have. If someone will tell me when I'm near 30 seconds, but that's basically it. But the three middle schools, that's a minimum. To me, the choice is either three middle schools or the magnet school as is. But that's just the way I feel. Thank you very much. But please read that article. It's good. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, we'll turn to the audience.
Good evening, Rick Short, 1002 Chilton Parkway. Dr. Rod, I congratulate you on some of your comments about having a flow chart. That is an awesome idea. Thank you, Ms. Stern, for backing him up. Thank you, Ms. Fleischer, for asking some awesome questions. You know what I don't understand about this COVID thing? So not to throw any teachers under the bus or the way that the whole operation works, but teachers or nurses or somebody is watching videos to try to figure out who is transmitting to who. So they do this in, like, say, basketball. They watch them when they play in a basketball without a mask on. But then during the halftime of a game, they all walk into a locker room with a mask on. There are some things happening that make no sense. And I go back to the old preaching. I know I sound like a preacher sometimes. Open your bus windows. Nobody knows where this COVID is spreading. It's probably spreading in all the buses. Nobody knows. I mean, I watched the West buses go the other day. 50% of them had their windows open. That's awesome. That's good. But some of the things I'm seeing just make absolutely no sense. And to the comments with everybody, doesn't seem like anyone's really happy about redistricting. And the same theme, you hear it all through it, is they're all going through all our kids are going through enough with COVID. So now, hey, why don't we just rip them all apart and distribute them all? So when you talk about health of our children, probably redistricting is a bad time. And you know what? If all 9 board members vote no, that means it has to go back to the drawing board. It doesn't mean that just because you took one step, there's another one. So there is an option 6. So I encourage everyone on the board to vote no coming up with redistricting at all. And it's all due to mental stress. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. On the line, we'll go to Beth Becker.
Hi, Beth Becker, Cherry Hill. I'm here to speak about the middle school redistricting. Kristen Viglietta and I shared with you earlier today a petition we circulated to advocate for all 3 middle schools to be 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and for students to be allowed to finish their middle school tenure at the school in which they started. That petition a few minutes ago was at 838 signatures. I have no problem with redistricting the middle schools, and I understand why it's important, but how is also very, very important. There's no evidence that a 6th grade center has any educational or social emotional benefit, especially in a district as large as ours, where the school will be completely isolated and the students will split again in 7th grade. Moving students once the new middle school is in place, is also detrimental to all students. Students from all 3 middle schools would be displaced and moved to a new school, ostensibly creating a 1-year school for current 5th graders and current 6th graders who would have 1 year in 6th grade and then move, or 1 year in 8th grade and then move. In both a 6th grade center and moving students to a new building, you are sending children to a 1-year school. This is a bad course of action for many reasons: increased busing, extra transitions at a terrible time, a probable lack of school spirit and student ownership of a building they're only in for 1 year, and probable lack of parent involvement in the PTA. A lack of upper class students, examples, and more. The transition issue is especially damaging for students with 504s and IEPs who not only have to learn a whole new school, but become comfortable with new therapists for the services they need, just to be switched again the next year. In addition, many students did not enter middle school knowing that they might be moved. I can guarantee that many Rosa students would not have chosen to attend Rosa had they known they would be uprooted in 1 or 2 years. And many Beck or Carusi students would have chosen Rosa had they known they would be moved there anyway in 7th or 8th grade. Middle school is about more than academics. There are cumulative extracurriculars in which 6th and 7th graders pay their dues and are rewarded with larger roles or even leadership in their activity in 8th grade. To work toward a goal for 2 years, only to be moved to a new school for 8th grade, a school that may not even have the same activities, let alone the institutional history you may have put into that activity. How demoralizing is that? Our district rightfully encourages students to get involved, make their school and world a better place, learn leadership skills. How does this reinforce those values? Please listen to the community members who signed the petition and weighed in on the thought exchange, and clearly do not want a 1-year school and want children to finish where they start. Also, thank you again for continuing to have Board of Ed meetings via Zoom and facilitating public comment. It's the only way I've been able to attend. And thank you for all those applied for the open Board of Ed seat and being willing to take on this very important commitment for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And that wraps up the second public comment. I'll turn it over to Dr. Melange for superintendent comments.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Let me just go through. Thank you to all the people who commented this evening. Let me just reiterate again, thought exchange is one way to take information. We have heard from a lot of people, the board, the administrative team, with perspectives about middle school redistricting. Always, the more information we receive, the better off we are. It's always valuable for us. There are 2 opportunities over the course of the next week for folks to be involved in sharing information. Again, the town hall, it's scheduled for tomorrow evening. Will be an in-person option as well as a Zoom option. That'll be from 7 to 9 p.m. over in the library annex at High School East. Tomorrow night during the town hall, we will announce we'll have a dedicated email address just about middle school redistricting, should people want to share additional thoughts. And then on Thursday, February the 3rd, from 7 to 8:30 p.m., just in a pure Zoom fashion, we'll be having a virtual town hall meeting. And we'll look to focus the discussion with families of children who have a 504 or an IEP, again, to talk about middle school redistricting. We are definitely interested in the law that Governor Murphy signed, allowing retired teachers to come back into the workforce. We're waiting for a little bit of guidance from the Department of Ed. We've already discussed internally about recruiting folks to have them come back, what that will look like. We definitely have some positions in some of the hard to fill areas that we would love to have some of our retired teachers, if they're interested, coming back and joining us more in the future as we start to go through that process. We're very excited about the fact that New Jersey is the 2nd state in the country to sign legislation for AAPI curriculum to be included in instruction in the district or in our districts and in the state. Again, just 2 states in the nation that have made that a curricular requirement at the state level. So we're very excited about that. Our curriculum teams have been having the discussion already. There'll be additional discussion. Certainly we'll move forward. I am grateful to the members of our community who organized a rally earlier in the fall, but we're back in the fall, had the support from Assemblywoman Lampett, who came out and spoke at the rally to help that legislation move forward and ultimately to be signed. I think that is it, Mr. Avalia.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. All right, we have need of a second executive session. No action will be taken at that time. I'm going to move that. Do I have a second? Ms. Stern. All right, thank you. Have a good night. And then I need a motion to adjourn. No. Okay. Okay, we're going to do a voice vote on moving to second executive. Say it again. We're going to go into closed session for a personnel matter. No action will be taken. Do I have a second? Mrs. Tong. Thank you, Mrs. Tong.